This is, of course, chapter 3, and you can see chapter 3, not a lot, you know, not tons, but it is enough that's packed with some serious creative inspiration. That's what I will say. And so in this chapter, you can see pretty small, but we've got some thin lit dies. I'm going to go through the thin dies, what we have here. We've got some 3D and even some new technology here, and of course, a little bit of steel rule. And what I will do is I'm just going to go through these, talk about kind of their features, and then we will get to the inspiration. So if you're only here for the inspiration, now's the time to go get yourself coffee, drink, whatever you need, because I'm going to go through the launch first. Okay, so let's just kind of clear this up, just kind of move this, and we'll kind of take it from here. I think we'll just kind of go through things. So first thing, of course, we'll talk about our thinlets. Do love thin dies, and of course every single time I'm always trying to push the envelope just a little bit more as far as detail goes. You know that I've done a lot of different background dies because I think these are a lot of fun, and really from a mixed media aspect, many makers, I know if you're a card maker, you see this as a card panel. It's a great card front, right? I'll kind of show you this right here. There's the sample for the packaging, right? It does make a great card front. This is perfect for fall, but it's also great for spring or anything else. But the beauty of this die, right, the detail of that, is that even though it cuts as a panel, you can just go in and snip this out, and you're going to see how a lot of makers use this for texture. So if you're into mixed media and you do things with, say, texture paste through a stencil, things like that, keep that in mind when you have die cuts, right? I'm going to move this just so it's a little darker under there. Especially detailed die cuts. Although it's designed for a look and feel, like I said, a card panel, if you're doing art journaling or collage on a canvas or something like that, cut apart your dies and utilize that texture. You can gesso over this, paint over this, and you do get a great detailed design that you can't achieve with a stencil, right? Because a lot of connection points on a stencil don't exist because it would drop out. So you can utilize detailed dies in that way. You can simply trim off this border if you don't want it. Some of the dies I designed don't even have borders. So keep that in mind with detailed dies. If you've ever looked at a background die, and you say, well, I don't really know if I would ever use that for a background, just at least try one. And if you're, again, into mixed media and collage, try it that way and see if it is your jam. It may be, it may not be, but I'll tell you again on the detail. What I love about this, of course, is really pushing the spec when it comes to detail. And I say spec because thin lines, if you've been die cutting for years, you know that that line usually started out pretty chunky. Back in the day, it was a very chunky design because that was the spec of manufacturing. And then each year it just gets better and better where we can dial it into something so thin and so detailed. And I do love this background die. It's really good. And because of the detail, many of you will remember this one that we launched. This is Perspective Butterfly, a favorite of mine, a favorite of many. This is a huge die. It's actually such a big die that it doesn't even fit in a standard envelope. If you have this die, it didn't come with an envelope, but if you store your dies in an envelope, here's just a little trick. Just take that storage envelope, right, that you would normally have, make a little slice down the side with your scissor. Pretty simple to do, just one little cut, maybe about 1 inch. And then you can put the die in and just the tip of that wing folds out. This might drive someone crazy. It doesn't bother me. I'd rather have it in an envelope than just flying around, pun intended. But this way, the way I store mine, it just in an envelope, like in a, in a drawer or a box, that's totally fine. But the perspective was really about creating a very large design that was packed with detail. Now the butterfly, if you Google it, you'll see so much inspiration from Perspective when we launched it, because you can use it on something really, really big, like a journal or a canvas or all that, but you can also cut it down and you can crop it out to different perspectives. And this was the inspiration for this one. This is the Perspective Moth. Now, I really did this, I'll be completely honest, I designed this one specifically for the wings, okay? I didn't care so much about the body, because it kind of looks like a cigar, or it even has like a weird little face in there, but it really is, it's a moth, right? But if you're not into the moth, if you don't really get the moth, but you do things with paper dolls, or you want something that's going to be a big collage with wings, that's the beauty of this new die, this Perspective Moth. I mean, take a look. Again, I'm going to push this out of the way so you can see the detail. Look at how much detail are in those wings. They are so lacy, very, very delicate. So you could go in and you could cut right here if you want these little tiny wings, or you can just cut and have these larger wings, or you can leave that connected. So you do have the ability to cut these off of the body. You'll even see one of the makes, I believe it was Nico, that even cut off the body and just made this into kind of a large bee. So you do you, but I wanted to just explain kind of the inspiration about that. This was all about creating large scale detail. And when I talk about large scale, just so you can see, if you thought Perspective Butterfly was big, the Moth was even bigger, because in order to achieve this thinner spec, we actually had to go bigger, right? So larger design just gave us more time to transition that detailed line, because I wanted these to be as delicate as possible. I see a jack-o'-lantern face too. So as far as how does this one fit in an envelope? Again, it doesn't come in an envelope, but here was kind of my hack for this. Took a regular standard envelope, and normally it would be folded here, the bottom, right? It will fit in here, right? If you angle it perfect, it's just going to fit totally fine, okay? If you don't want to spend the time of like seating it down in the corner and you're just going to drop that in, well, then you can also just create another fold. So it's totally up to you. If you just want to be able to drop it in, you can create a crease in that plastic, use a bone folder. But if you always just kind of tuck it in the corner, just seat it in there, it will fit in the envelope as is. Either or. But I just like to share those tips, because sometimes people just, they get a little panicky about, oh, it doesn't really fit in the envelope. It will, just, you know, whether you want to kind of snug it in there or just drop that in. All right. Very, very beautiful. The question is, will you have smaller versions of these? I will not. And the reason is the only way to achieve this detail, as I explained on this one, is you have to go bigger. You have to go bigger to create these lines. If we reduce this, you can't have the space in all of these lines. So all these lines will become compact, and then they will become back to those thicker lines. So all the detail that we see in perspective is achieved because of the scale we gave it, which is really cool. Like for example, on this one, if we shrink this, we're going to lose all this. This will all become solid. These will all become solid. These will all become solid. These will become solid in between, because you still need to have space in between a die. There's a lot of engineering that goes into a die cut, believe it or not, because again, it's a tool that's cutting, not like an electric cutter, which you can get more detail from with that. But what I love about a die cut, of course, is it just achieves more of a finished look, in my opinion, because the pressure of a die cut is like a cookie cutter, right? When you cut into that, you kind of round off the top of that paper. And so that's what I always love about a die cut. I know there's a lot of people that do e-cutting, and that's great, but you know that if you do cardstock, your edge of that cardstock is very crisp. It doesn't have that contour that you get with a die cut. Again, personal preference, maker preference, but that's really what I love about perspective. Okay, moving right along. Next, we're going to talk about something very simple, but I always like to talk about it because some people get it and some people don't get it. So let me just explain why I wanted to do this series of dies. These are stacked rectangles, and stacked rectangles are actually part of the stacked shape series. And what this is you get 5 of a nested shape. And nested dies are nothing new to the die cut world, but normally you would get one set that starts big and it goes all the way down into a smaller scale. Totally perfect. But what I like about this concept is, first of all, the dies themselves do not have a large edge to them. And I'll show you that in here. So normally, if you have any Sizzix dies, you know that normally there's a little bit of a metal edge either on the inside or the outside of a die. Sometimes if you are cutting thicker things like watercolor paper, you could get a little bit of bruising in there. But the nice thing about this, we eliminated that because the design is so simple. We didn't need to have that extra kind of structure around there. But this is very cool because it's going to allow you to cut out multiples of that size in a design. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that means that if you're going to cut out this die, right? First of all, you can just cut out the solids, right? And that would be taking that die, placing it on your cardstock, whether it was color cardstock or whether it was, you know, any type of pattern paper, and you get all these different rectangles that you can use either way. But because you get, of course, that nested shape, we know the ability of putting one die into the next when we run it through. So meaning we can take this one, nest this one inside. So that would be utilizing these 2 dies, place them down and run it through. So how do you keep them from shifting? Well, I use sticky grid all the time. I use Sizzix sticky grid. I put that on the cutting pad so I can stick that down and blade side up run my paper through. So sticky grid is how I utilize these perfectly versus trying to do this with washi tape. So not only do you get the solids, but then you can get the frames. Now this, of course, is just showing you the neck size. But if you wanted a wider frame, you could start with this as your outer, and you could drop this one in the middle, and then you would have a wider frame, and so on, right? So you get the idea of the value of having this frame. But right now you're thinking, okay, Captain Obvious, I can do that with my nested dies that I currently have because I have all these different sizes. I can make my frame, so have a nice day. Okay, yes, but what about something like this? What if we want to start creating collage panels? Maybe you're a card maker, maybe you're into junk journaling, maybe you're into planning, maybe you want to do this in the front of a shadow box. But what's great about these tiles is they allow you to place multiples of the same shape on here. And you might be looking, you're like, well, wait a minute, there's no multiples there. You're right, there isn't. This is still one you could do with your nested shapes. You can place this on a regular card panel. You, again, place it on sticky grid so you get perfect placement because you're placing it blade up. You place your cardstock down, you run it through, and now you have these perfect windows to cut out, and you have the solids underneath. But if you're into like slimline cards or something where you have a much longer work surface that is going to require more than just one of each die with your traditional nested shapes, that's where these tiles become beneficial. It gives me the ability of, let's say I wanted to do a card and I wanted 3 or 4 windows of exactly the same size. I can do that, right? I can take that die and I can put 4 rectangles that are all the same, run it through, and now I have a great window for a slimline card, or maybe it's going to go into a scrapbook. Or if you wanted to do, again, like that whole collage idea for a slimline, you can do the same thing because now we are repeating sizes, right? Here's 2 of this one, there's 3 of this one. It just allows you to customize it because with every set you get 5 of each of that shape. Does that make sense? So once you get it, and I think sometimes it really is just about understanding it because you could look and go, yeah, I already have it. But when you see kind of the benefit of it, it is excellent. Now, the reason I wanted to do these, of course, because I added so many other shapes. These are all the different shapes. Now I can tell you that Sizzix has already started retiring some of these shapes. That's just what they do. It's out of my control. I wish I had better control of that, but it is what it is. But most of them are still available, if not all of them, at retailers now. But I can tell you that some are already starting to disappear and go away. But all of these, same concept, right? You always will get 5 each of that design, from triangles to ovals to circles to hexagons. And again, the benefit is you could also mix and match. So if you wanted to do a card that was very geometric and you had rectangles and hexagons and circles, you can totally do that. It's also a great way if you do a lot of collage, that maybe you did one big mixed media painting, print, journal page, you can chop it up into amazing art tiles. I know in the art journaling world, there's all these fodder challenges, you know, where they're creating all these elements to use. These dies are perfect for that because you can place so many of them on one sheet, run it through your machine, and cut out all sorts of wonderful collage tiles. So that's what I wanted to explain as why I continue to add a shape to that. And I can give you a hint that next year we are adding, I think, probably the final shape to it, which will be some hearts, because I know a lot of people have asked for that. But that will be next year. Anyway, okay, moving on. Hopefully I explained that. I know sometimes people just look at that and they're like, yeah, I've been there, done that, but that's all right. Say it isn't so retiring. Oh yeah, that's a story of my life here. Sometimes dies will last years, and sometimes it seems like they last weeks, but I know they're a little bit longer than that. All right, next up is an alphabet. You know I like me a good alphabet, but this one is a favorite. It kind of brings me back to, of course, the whole high school days. This is Varsity. And the great thing, as you can see, is it's kind of like, well, it's like that Letterman jacket. Now, some alphanumerics I've explained in the past have multiples of a letter, and you would always see there's like usually a key chart on the front of the packaging that would have a count of multiples. If you don't see that count, that means this font does not have any duplicates. So in this case, it does not have any duplicates. It's single. And that is because this font is designed to have this solid, and I'll show you a little bit more in detail. And you can see the solid includes stitching. So it's actually blade that will kind of cut out those little slots to create stitching. And then there's this wonderful detailed outline. And the reason I wanted to design it this way is because usually, like a Letterman jacket, there is that letter that is attached to that felt that's attached to that substrate. Well, I didn't want to do a solid shadow to put this on because I thought everything would get very, very bulky. So the way this is designed is when you cut it out, it will cut the solid and the outline. So if you want two different colors, you have to switch it up. Let me just explain it a little bit better here. All right. So for example, on Varsity, now here's what I did. I went and got some felt. Now the felt that I did use, I just want to explain this. This is not like your traditional go to the fabric department crafting felt, right? This is adhesive back felt. You can find it at some craft stores, usually in the kids department. I bought mine on Amazon, where I just looked up adhesive back felt, right? Or thin felt. Some of it, sometimes you can use felt that they would use, say, in a pennant flag. But this felt, because it's adhesive back, is also a little stiffer. And you can see, I'm trying to get it as close as possible. You can actually see the little stitch marks in that felt. Now, it's not sewn, it's just marks, and you'll see from the makes that the marks definitely show up better on cardstock, but it's very cool. Like, this is very touchy-feely. So this one is felt, and then the outline, I cut it out of flocked cardstock, right? It's gonna give it that little bit of fuzz because I didn't want the outline to be as thick as this. Again, if you look at a Letterman jacket, you know, that letter is made out of some sort of, I don't know, fluffity stuff. I don't know what it is, but then the base of it is felt and then it's attached to the jacket. So here is just a cutout piece. I'll do my best with my pork chop hands just to show you how this really is cut. So I'll just pop this apart because these are not stuck together. It's just the detail of how it fits together. All right, so there we go. So there is the 4 out of black flocked cardstock, and there is that adhesive back felt. You can see it's got the paper backing. It's still pretty nice. But the cool thing is you can just use this, you can just use this, or as I did, you can nest those together. And I would have kept the little 4 inside in black, but that didn't make it to the live. I don't know where it is. It's probably on the floor somewhere. But you get the idea for Varsity. And that's what's just fun about this. You can do initials, monograms. You're going to see so many clever ideas for the makes in so many different styles, right? You might look at this and go, oh, it's very, you know, university, collegiate. No, it doesn't have to be. It can just be a very cool font. But I love the detail, and I love things that immediately take you back to a time of nostalgia for people.
How tall the letters are?
The letters are 1 inch. It's a 1 inch tall font. So let me just show you a die, just so you can see what it looks like. So here's the die itself. So this is what I was saying, is that the die is going to cut the solid and cut in those little stitch marks, right? So it actually pushes through. So if you have cardstock, it's going to like literally almost punch the holes through the cardstock, if you will. But then if you look on the outline, there's a very skinny blade, and that is what's cutting the frame. So in one pass, you're going to get the solid and the outline. So in order to achieve this, you would need to cut a letter through 2 different substrates. So first the red felt, and you would have a red outline, and then the black, and you would have the black outline. And then you can mix and match, right? You can do the other one where it's got, you know, black flocking on the inside with maybe a red felt outline. You do you. But it's a really cool font. Once you get the hang of it, I love it. I love the look of it. I think it's going to be great for the holiday season as well. It's not just something that's summertime fun, but it's really one of my favorites. And I hope it sticks around. I mean, I certainly never want to, sometimes I'll talk tomorrow after the live because you dwell a lot on things going away. Well, as a designer, you know, you get a little separation anxiety. You put a lot into that, and then it doesn't stick around for a long time. And alphabets are kind of another thing that historically they get discontinued quicker than they should, in my opinion. Anyway, stepping off my soapbox now, I promise. Okay, Mario's laughing. He's like, he knows me too well. He's like, yeah, you can't change it. Okay.
They love in and out.
I can try, yeah. But I just tell you that because I know the frustration of a maker when you see something and you're like, oh, I'll get that later. And there's many brands where stuff sticks around for a long time, but it's just been, yeah, this is not one of them. Okay, so this die, this was really inspired by Zoe Hillman. I know a lot of you know Zoe. She's the one that owns the Tim Holtz Addicts group. Ultimate Tim Holtz fan and my friend. Shout out to Zoe. And this was really inspired by another product that I have with another company, okay? But I want to explain that because you don't necessarily need both products to get benefit and value and use out of this, right? So these guys, I'll just kind of show you in the back. There we go. They're all loose dies. They are called decorative trims. So you can see in the package that they're individual dies, okay? They are thin dies. They will cut wonderful trims, wonderful borders. In each pattern, there's 3 different patterns. So there's like that little Decorative edge, there's a flat scallop. I love the flat scallop because it's not so ruffly fluffy. It's just a, flat. And then I like the pinked edge. The pinked edge is cool as well. It's got blade all the way around, so it's going to cut a piece this size. It's not something that like an edge die where you can extend this. It is what it is. And that's why for these you have two sizes. So for example, on the pinked edge, you get a wide and a narrow. But these dies are sized to fit this product line. This is from Stampers Anonymous. This is called Etc. And you're going to see some of the makes. I know I saw it on Emma created. There's actually several makers use these, but these have been around for quite a while. Etc. is a thick board, right? So there's multiple sheets in here. These are laser cut. So this is a material that cannot be die cut because it's way thicker than chipboard, super, super thick. But the challenge of this, of course, is as many makers, a lot of them painted it, but in the case of Zoe, she would cover it with paper, and I know other makers did that as well, but then they would have to either go around with a craft knife or file all this little detail out to cover these with paper because they look amazing when you cover them with paper. And each pack has, there's not like a multi-pack, there's really a pack. Maybe we'll do that in the future, but right now this is a pack of like all scallops or all pinked edge or all brackets. Maybe that is a concept to do a multi-pack now that we have these, but here's what it turns into. And this is what I love as a maker. So good because you're making embellishments, right? So I just keep mine in a crayon tin. You do you. You can keep yours in a bag. But take a look at these guys, right? So you can see the thickness of that. Again, it's a board, so you cannot die cut this. But this is how perfect these line up. So look at all of these cool tiles, right? So you can create an edge. And the nice thing, of course, is you can choose the best part of the paper, right? Your favorite part, if you want to get that little detail, right? That little bit of Scotch tape that shows in. Look how clean and perfect the die cuts. So you would cut your paper with this, glue it onto your Etc. with collage medium, and that's it. You're good to go. And you can use these as embellishments. You can use them, you'll see in some of the makes that you have the ability to stack these up as ledges. That's why you get multiples in a pack. So if you wanted, for example, this ruler to be a ledge on a project, you would just take the same size but plain ones and you would simply stack them. And because they're thick, you only need like 2 or 3 to really get a nice ledge on your mixed media make to put bottles or whatever on a shelf. But check out the detail. Isn't that fun? Very cool. Cool embellishment because again, it's rigid, but even if you didn't have these, because maybe you didn't need anything durable, you were just going to use it as a trim on a scrapbook page, or you wanted to use it as a band on a junk journal, that's where these dies are still going to be incredibly beneficial, even without the Etc. But it's important to remember that there is a blade all the way around. So it's not like you can lay this on the edge of a page and expect it to do like a decorative edge. No, it's cutting the trim. That's why they're called decorative trims, right? So there you go. So usually when I'm kind of in this zone, take a look at this cigar one. This is another great idea. If you don't have paper, washi tape, right? Take your favorite washi tape, stick it on a piece of cardstock, and then die cut it. And there you go. Now you can use your washi tape like decorative paper because now you give it an edge, right? Because you can't just cut the piece of tape. That's not going to work. You have to put it on something. But if you put it on cardstock, now you can take all your washi tapes because most of these are not wider. I mean, if you have, this is pretty much like a 1/2-inch washi tape, but you can even go skinnier. Anyway, just some ideas. A lot of fun, something where, I always like to show that. That's the importance of seeing a live, because if you just saw this one, online, you're just like, yeah, boring, moving on, right? Because I like to keep the packaging as generic as possible. I want you as the maker to be the visionary. I want you to see the shape as whatever you want. Maybe you're into steampunk, maybe you're into Victorian, maybe you're into rainbow, right? Whatever you're into, that's what I want you to see as shape. And I think that doing it like this on the package really kind of directs that. Ooh, look at this one. Yeah, look at that one right there. Isn't that cool? I love being able to pick out, this is from Memoranda. So I love picking out the elements to create embellishments. And so I'll just sit one day and just make a bunch of these and store them, the whole compartmental thinking. So that is decorative trims. Definitely a benefit to see these lives because you could have your own style. You could have your own favorite paper brand, or maybe you want to do glitter strips and you have glitter cardstock. Now you've got it with a die. So we've got that. Okay, moving on. I'm going to try to clear some of this stuff out of the way a little bit. Cool. I might need that back a little later, Mario, but who's to say, right? Who's to say at this point? You never really know with me. That's how it is. Okay. All right. So next we're going to talk about steel rule dies, and we'll talk about 3D. Okay. So steel rule dies, why do we do them? Well, honestly, I don't do as many as I used to. Okay. I agree, because it's a great way to use the scraps. It's a great way to use scraps, those trims. And so, yeah, that was just a really good idea that Zoe had. All right. Steel rule dies. I used to do a ton of them. In fact, when I started with Sizzix, that's all I did. But steel rule dies have serious design limitations, but I will say that we've gotten, oh my gosh, so far from how it used to be. And we continue to add that. Now, when I add a steel rule die to a line, it's because I plan on this shape being cut on thicker substrates consistently. Okay, now that doesn't mean you can't use thicker cardstocks with your thin dies, but these, I see chipboard, I see metal, I see thicker cardstocks consistently, and that is really what determines for me whether I should put this as a steel rule die or a thin die. Because let's face it, both of these could have been thin dies. The design would have worked as a thinlet. But because of the material, and you'll see from the makes, that's why I wanted it as a steel rule die. A steel rule die just means it's a thicker die. It's got a steel blade in there, a foam, and it's going to allow you to cut thicker things. Now this one, this is called Potted 2. Now it's called Potted 2 because obviously, well, there was a Potted 1 back in the day. Potted 1 was also a steel rule die that cut these wonderful pots. The design, this is the die for Potted 2, but the design is the same, where you have that basic bucket, if you will, and then you have the accents to change it from a clay pot, a metal barrel, a wood barrel, right? Anything you want to do just by changing it. So this, for example, you can use wood grain cardstock or the 3D lumber folder. You can use foil tape. And you can see that this is done. You can do it with grunge board if you have any, or chipboard, or any kind of thicker substrates that you want. But I love the effect because it's going to add dimension. And then you could put your paper flowers in there. So if you have, you know, any of your tattered florals or funky florals, these were great. That was the whole idea behind Potted initially, is it gave you something to put things in. But of course, throughout the years, I've designed many taller flowers, right? Wildflowers, the stems, things that when you put a stem in here, it was like this big. It didn't go. This was just too short. And that was the inspiration for Potted 2. So you can see the scale fairly similar from the top opening part, right? But what we've done is we've elongated that design and gave it just kind of a different look and feel. So you still get that tall terracotta pot. You can do that tall bucket, or you can do that tall pail. And we added a couple of little extra accents in this one that we didn't do in this, just to kind of mimic like a sap bucket is what I was going for, right? But the cool thing about Potted 1 and Potted 2 is now you've got one for your smaller flowers to kind of do all those things, and you have that taller bucket. And the reason I wanted to do this versus, because let's face it, there's so many vessels that you can do for plants, right? You can do a wheelbarrow, you can do a watering can, you can do a mason jar, you can do so many different vessels. But to me, that became very specific. And why I was intrigued by this is that I have one die that I can get different looks from. So that was really why I kind of went with this, because, you know, this could be, you could have grapes coming out of this if you wanted to do something for, you know, for a cocktail party, for wine, or whatever it was. It could be steampunk, or it can be very garden. So that is Potted 2. I really like the idea of having a vessel now for the taller flowers. And you'll see in the makes how the makers did use those for the taller stems. Now this one, you know, you've probably seen a bazillion Matchboxes. I know I have. This wouldn't be the first time I've even done a Matchbox die, but this one we decided to do a little different. And I'll show you how to construct this as well. So this die is very cool because it's a Biggs L, gives you the ability to cut thick cardstock to make a matchbox. Now this matchbox, if you're familiar with Ideology, we have those kind of finished matchboxes. This one is bigger. So you actually get a bigger matchbox than those finished ones, just so you know, because I wanted something that was a little bit more, I don't know, collage-y, if you will. But you'll notice down here that you also get some bonus dies, right? So this not only gives you that steel rule die, but you also get a pack of thinlets. And the great thing about this is it's going to cut that matchbox, but it also has these little elements. Now, what do these elements do? What are they for? Well, they're for whatever you want, really. But my idea was you could either use it as a solid matchbox, collage it, which you'll see some of the makers do, but you also get these little circular dies. So let me just take this. I'll bring in the die just so you can see, because I have mine kind of laid out. So this is the die that's going to cut and score the wrap as well as the insert, the drawer, if you will, for the Matchbox. So you can see the blade, and that's also crease rule, right? So that's also a steel blade, but it creases, it doesn't cut. And then we have this. These are the thin dies that you get. So you can see you get numbers and you get this series of circles, and there's 3 of them. The first one just cuts a hole. And the reason it cuts a hole is that it will allow you to cut a hole in that wrap. So if you wanted, say, a window to see what was in the drawer, so maybe you wanted to put acetate behind this, and inside you were going to put, I don't know, botanical elements or beach or whatever you were doing because you were doing a little collage and you wanted a vessel. I like the fact that you could cut a window. So you would cut this out first. That would give you, your pieces, your shapes. And then you would take this and you would place down that circle die and you would cut through that. Okay. Now you don't have to just use the circle die. In fact, any die that you want, if you have a small butterfly, you can do that. You can take these numbers, you can cut out anything from the wrap. Now, something specific about this wrap is that I wanted to really think about, okay, how would I use this? Well, yeah, you might occasionally make a Matchbox, cool, but maybe you're just that festive person, right? You're that person that likes to do little favors, and you're going to see an amazing make from Tammy B where she kind of took it to that level. But maybe you're making party favors or treat boxes or things for your neighbor, teacher's gifts, and you need to make multiples of this. Or maybe you're going to make ornaments at Christmas, right? Where you want a little snow scene in here. The other benefit of that circle is that circle also fits the dimensional domes, right? If you're familiar with these guys, that's what this is. A dimensional dome is this dome that has this sticky ring that is dimensional. It creates that bubble. And the cool thing about this box, I'll show you right here, is see, you can add a dimensional dome to that box. Now, even though the sticky ring is on the wrong side, I'll tell you that, because remember, this dome wasn't designed for this box. But what you would do is you would just leave this on. Instead, you're going to put your adhesive here because you want to slide it in and glue it up from the inside. But now you could add a dimensional dome. And the cool thing about this is when you have a dome, I also want it finished. And that's where these other 2 dies came into play. I wanted to add trim dies. So those are the other 2 circles. One is going to cut just a solid piece of trim, just a ring, and the other is going to cut that little pinked edge. And that is what's going to fit around the dome if you want to embellish it. So the other reason why I included numbers is I was thinking forward. I have so many requests around the holiday season to do advent things. Well, I'm really not that guy, right? I can't think like that or commit to that many repetition things, but this to me was the perfect opportunity to incorporate elements for people that wanted to do advents. This would be a great idea for an advent calendar because you can create the boxes. You can either have a little window to show a little sneak of what that gift is, or you can leave them solid, but you can take these and that's going to be that number that will fit on here or in here, right? So if you cut the circle, you can still use the 2 numbers to do 25, 24, all that, and do the countdown. And again, there's your Matchbox, how it slides in and out. And it will slide in and out of the solid, and it will also slide in and out of this. So see if you had a little gift, and wait till you see the makes. You're just going to be like, whoo, crazy. And yes, you can do dioramas. Wait till you see what the maker did. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. But the reason I'm telling you all this is because, as I've said before, when it comes to making multiples, it's so much easier to get into repetition, right? Do all your prep, cut all your paper, cut all of these. Now these, when I make my Matchboxes, I love to use my Craft Heavy Stock from Ranger. Why? It's a 130-pound cover. So this is not super thick like chipboard, because even though you can cut this out of chipboard is going to be very challenging to fold. Chipboard's great for flat things like potted, but chipboard is not great for folded things because it becomes too bulky when it gets on itself. So this Craft Stock, you can hear it, you can feel it. 130-pound cover is very rigid, so I like to cut it out of that. The cool thing about this, the die is designed where you simply cut an 8.5 by 11 in half, and you will get 2 boxes out of each sheet of paper, right? So I would go in, again, compartmental crafting, I would cut all these in half, then I would just cut all my box pieces. So I have this is going to be the drawer, and then this is going to be the wrap. And once those are ready, you can then sit down and go, okay, how do I want to embellish it? And when you're embellishing, this could be something you do watching TV or whatever to cut your windows, because these guys are designed to fit in the Sidekick. One of the things that I love about the Sizzix Sidekick, especially for seasonal makes, is the ability to kind of create on the go. So you can do your big prep in your craft room using your Vagabond or your Big Shot to cut that stuff. And then you can take all these panels, take your favorite, whether it's the circles or maybe you're gonna have different shapes. Maybe it's a snowflake, maybe it's a snowman or holly or whatever's gonna fit on that panel, but these fit in that sidekick. So now you can sit there and you can run all of those wraps through your sidekick, and then you can go into assembling, okay? So let's talk about that. How do we assemble it? This is the demo part. So again, if you're not interested in learning how to make the Matchbox, you can take yourself a quick little break, because it's important to show you how to do this, because I will be honest, when we sent this to the makers, there were a few makers that are like, whoa, how do you do this? Now, everyone can have their own way to build. And so I'm going to tell you right now, if you find a way that you like to build these, you do you. You do not have to follow this. This is just the way that I wanted to do it by design, okay? So here are my tips and tricks. Any die that I have that has crease rule in it, there are many people that will take a die that has crease rule and then go over it again with some type of bone folder, paper creaser, whatever that is. That's not me, because that's just another step, right? So what I've learned is that if you have a straight edge, it will really follow these crease rules better than you think. Because if you look on this side, those crease rules don't go through it. They kind of just deboss where it needs to fold. Can you guys see that? I'm trying to tip it to the light so it catches all those crease rules to have it. So what I do is I have a stack of grid blocks. Now these are my stamping blocks with Stampers Anonymous. They don't have to be these, guys. It could be whatever you have, okay? But I like to use a grid block, and I'll choose a block depending on what I'm building, right? It might be a paper house, it might be a longer box, it might be something small, anything that's gonna have a crease line in it. And I'll take something that fits pretty much what I've cut, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the crease rule with the edge, and you want your edge of whatever you're folding against to be squared. Like, you don't want it rounded. So if you have an acrylic block that's rounded, that's not going to work. You want something with a straight edge. It could be a ruler, it could be the design ruler. I just like this because it fits in my hand. If I had a ruler, I'd be, you know, just kind of fumbling with it. And all you're going to do is place that right against the edge, and you're going to push off of that edge. And you can see it just folds right over. Then I just move it up, push, move that up, and so I can just get that paper flush to the edge of the block and push. So simple. So the tabs, push, push, and that just goes. So here's, look at this. See when it wasn't on the line? You see that little curve? Because I was sloppy and I didn't have it on the line. That's what the paper will do. So if you just have it on the line like that, you guys see that? I'm trying to see and show you at the same time. You're just going to push, move that up, again, flush to the line, push, move that up, flush to the line, push. So simple. And you're going to do that all the way around, and you can do that to the box pieces, you can do that to the wrap. Anything that you have, you would just find the appropriate block. So if something's longer, there's longer blocks. But again, I'm sure you have things in your craft space that you can use. I just happen to like these because they're thin, and it just makes it just kind of feel like I'm only folding the paper and I'm not trying to fumble with a block. You guys get it? See how easy it is? You're just pushing against that edge. So simple. So simple. All right. So once you have everything folded, I'm not going to finish this. I already did one over here, the magic of television, but I actually folded more than I thought I would. Here's what you have. You have the wrap and you have the insert. Now you can do whatever adhesives work for you. Some people are huge fans of hot glue. Totally fine with that. Some of you love score tape. I love score tape for a lot of things. But when it comes to building something that is going to be a little functional, that I might need to just fine tune a little bit, I prefer a liquid adhesive. Use your favorite liquid adhesive. You do whatever it is that you want. Is this Big's Matchbox bigger than the previous Matchbox Die? Oh gosh, that's a good question, Patricia. I'm actually not sure. Maybe Sizzix knows. I don't really know. I don't know. That's a great question. I kind of think that it is, but don't quote me on that. So I know that Sizzix is in the house. They can pull that up on their website and just tell me. If you tell me the measurement, I can tell you the measurement of this one. All right. So on your tabs of the wrap, right? This could be either way. There's no like right or wrong. You could either have this.
Zoe said it's the same.
There you go. Thanks, Zoe. It's the same. Same as the other Matchbox. Same. Oh, that's good. It was a good Matchbox then. So it was. So with this, right? If you have that thick tab, you might want it to cover the edge. You also might want something where you just leave a little bit. There is no right or wrong for this. I just kind of think that if it's going to cover, that will be finished. I will tell you that when you're doing the wrap, don't do the wrap so tight, because that's just going to make the box going in a little bit tighter, right? So to me, it's kind of just a good habit to use it this way, so it stops itself because of the paper. Again, do you. I'm going to use Collage Medium because I'm just going to use a liquid adhesive that's going to go on here. I'm just going to place this on. I like Collage Medium because it dries completely clear and it's permanent and it's matte finish, more important. So like if you're doing, say, glossy accents, if you're an over gluer and you get glue ooze, then you have to worry about the shine. So with this, I'm kind of, with my fingers, I'm squeezing it down, but I'm also kind of squaring it up. I'm just making sure that these edges stay. I'm able to go in here, and that's really why I prefer a liquid adhesive, because if you do, say, double stick and you fold it over, once you stick it, it's stuck, right? You can't really move it. So if it's a little crooked, it's a little crooked. Collage Medium doesn't take
So once you stick it, it's stuck?
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah. So once that is there, where my paper stops lifting, okay, I'm just going to set that aside. And then we'll get onto the box. Now here's how I do the box. Again, you can do it your own way. If you notice, the sides of the box have this little tab. And I think this is the little tab that kind of confused a lot of people, because it's like, where does that go? I wanted the Matchbox to look finished on the inside, right? If you know, like a vintage Matchbox, it has that paper wrapped inside. And that's really what I wanted to achieve. And in order to achieve it, I needed this extra little tab that's going to fold in. And this way, when I fold this over, I'll show you right there, right? And you bring the side up, you'll see that it's going to be a finished edge, right? Because otherwise you'd have that straight cut edge. So this just kind of gives bulk to the walls of the box. Now, because of that, obviously the thicker the paper, even at 130 pound, it's pretty thick, right? So when you're making this turn, you're like, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't just stand up like it should. Well, it would if it was, I would say, normal thinner cardstock. I think most of the time when we do dies, we spec it at between 80 and 100 pounds. So 130 is a bit extreme, but it will still work. So you need to do what's going to work best for your aesthetic, what you like. So I'm going to do the same thing, roll, fold, stand up. And I'm going to do those outer walls first. No glue at this point. They're just there. Could you glue these? Sure. If you wanted to add glue because you wanted to make sure they were going to stay, go for it. But next we're going to do these tabs. And here's what I did here. So the tabs, we're going to essentially bring these walls in and do these tabs and do the wrap. So what I like to do is I'll just go in and I'm going to add a little bit of glue, little Collage Medium. You guys see that? On that inside panel. So this way I can wrap this up. And when I wrap this up, I have to do it on the table, but I'm going to show you what I'm doing. I'm standing this up and I'm squaring up these corners, right? So with my fingers, can you see that? I'm just using those as little corner guides. There you go. Perfect. So I'm just standing that up first, just to, doesn't take very long, but you can use clothespins, you can use little clips, you can use tiny clips, you can use whatever clamps you need. But Collage Medium, it doesn't take long to do it setup, right? So there's your inside tabs, and you want that to be as square as possible. Again, if that drives you crazy, you can take care of that. But this next step is going to resolve it. So next I want to fold this one down like I would, and now I'm going to put glue on the top of the tabs. So really those little folding flaps, do you guys see that? There we go. That's where I'm putting glue. How much glue? Well, some people like a lot. I just kind of do a little blob. That's going to work. And now I'm going to fold this down, and I'm going to repeat the process. But now when I fold this down, that's what's going to kind of push those side panels in. See how it's going to tuck those in? But again, I just work on the table because I can use that for leverage. I can, if you want to square up those corners, you can go in with a bone folder or something just to make a nice, clean corner. And that's it. Finished. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. That's it. So it's really just a little bit of glue, blob, blob. Stand that up. Square those in first, because that's pretty important. And the reason I say square is because really what I'm feeling is this corner. I don't want this in too far, and I don't want it out too far. And so I find that just once you kind of find this jam with your fingers, and you just kind of hold it for a second, you know that your fingers are like on both sides of that corner. There you go. You just kind of get the feel. A hot glue, this would not be good because one, it would probably be blistering hot on your fingers, and two, hot glue is really, really chunky, and so it leaves a lot of bulk in the small tabs. Okay, there you go. So there are those tabs. Now we're going to do the same thing. A little bit of glue here, a little bit of glue here. Fold this, and we do the wrap. We're going to fold that in. Again, push that down, push that into the corner. Use your fingernails, use your fingers, square it up. It's just paper. Paper doesn't have a memory. So if things get a little wonky, right? If things start to look a little bowed, don't freak your freak. Just go in and square it back up. It's all good, right? You don't need to perform CPR on your box, but there you go. That's it. Matchbox, and then you have your sleeve, and then you're just going to kind of fit that in. It is designed to be a snug fit, right? That's its design because, and you're going to see from the makes, we wanted to make sure that you could use them as little vessels for collage, right? So maybe you wanted to stand this up and you have something peeking out of the top, or you're going to create something where it's on the side. You don't want it to where it's going to slide out. Now, if you make your wrap looser, that would give you way more freedom to slide this. So you do have that option that if you didn't want this friction fit, you would just make the wrap a little looser, and then if you wanted to, you could glue in that box. But pretty simple, right? Once you see it, you kind of get it. Okay, hopefully you do anyway. So that was it. That was the Matchbox demo. Not bad. Hopefully you guys found a little trick or two from that. It's not intimidating at all, and once you kind of find your groove, again, like I said, repetition, you would just be building boxes like crazy. All right, perfect. Thanks, Mario. I'll get rid of that. I'll get rid of those blocks real quick. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, so wrapping up the launch, and then we're going to get into the inspiration, are some 3Ds. Now, we've done stuff a little different for 3D, which I like, and a shout out to Sizzix for really pushing the envelope of this. So if you're not familiar with 3D, 3D is an embossing folder that gives you extra dimension, right? Instead of just innie and outie, it's very sculpted. And we started 3D a few years ago and did a lot of big backgrounds. But I know from a lot of people doing artist trading cards, they're doing smaller things, that we needed stuff smaller. So I said, well, what if we took the 3D and we shrunk it down into a mini folder? Could we do that? Well, we didn't know if we would have the ability to do technology. Sure, we've done them small with an Impresslit, but could we take an all over background like botanical and actually shrink it? Could we get the design that you would see, because remember it's all spec, the design and detail you would see on a regular panel, and reduce it to scale? And the answer is heck yeah. So a shout out to Ryan at Sizzix, who is the mastermind behind all of the 3D technology and doing that. But take a look at these new mini 3D folders. So it's the same design, same detail, nothing is cropped off, it's just scaled down. And so the beauty of this, especially for people that do a lot of collage work too, maybe you want a little bit of a pattern showing through a patchwork, right? But if you crop this, if you're like, okay, I'm going to take my tiles, my stacked tile dies, and I'm going to cut this, okay, well, you're just going to get like, I don't know, some fingers. You're not going to get much detail in that rectangle. But now if you did that, look at that. You could cut this up and get a lot more detail in the minis. So as with anything, and I talk about this when I do the mini stencils with Stampers Anonymous, it's the same thing, right? Sometimes you want something as a large scale, and sometimes you want something in a smaller scale, depending on your make. So really, some people are mini makers where they like to do a lot of smaller things, and some people just do bigger makes. So the cool thing is if you like to do smaller things, then you will like these new mini folders. Now take a look at this, that rose, oh my gosh, right? Loved it big, magic smaller. And what's really interesting that we found is if you look, there's actually more detail, in my opinion, to my eye, in the mini than we even achieved in the big, which I think surprised all of us, right? Because like with dies, as I mentioned, you have to go bigger to get more detail. And in the case of a folder, by reducing it, I think we were just able to get smaller elements, which really sharpened the focus of a 3D folder. Isn't that beautiful? That smaller rose, it is, I agree. Yeah, Jasmine, I agree. It's more detail. It really is, because you see that and it's like, this was already impressive, but this was like, what? How is that possible? So a couple of tips if you're new to 3D, whatever paper you use, you want to make sure that you mist both sides of the paper with water just one time. If your paper is too wet, your folder will rip right through your paper, regardless of the thickness. So just a mist, because that's going to soften the fibers. Then you're going to put it into your folder, 3D, 3 times, right? So if you're embossing something 3D, it's 3 passes through a Big Shot or a Vagabond. You want to emboss that, take it out, let it dry, or you can use a heat tool before you do your inking or your mediums, because you don't want to work on damp paper. If you have thin paper that you're trying to do 3D, maybe you wanted to do this on vellum or something, and every time you do it, because you can't really spray, I mean, you can spray vellum, but it doesn't really do much to it because vellum is already sealed. But let's say you have a thin paper and every time you do 3D, it's ripping no matter what. Another good trick is to take, like, we'll say vellum, for example. You can take a sheet of vellum, take a sheet of cardstock that you don't care, you don't like. I have a whole stack of pink cardstock that I don't use for anything other than this. Layer it under the vellum and then put both pieces into the folder. And that will help minimize or balance the pressure that's given. And so it will emboss the paper in the vellum, but this way it doesn't rip through those thinner substrates. So keep that in mind. If you're working with thinner papers, even if it's cardstock and it's constantly ripping no matter what you do, put 2 pieces of something in there. Even copy paper will help kind of equal out the pressure and keep it from ripping through your substrate. So there is my little tip on 3D. So those are the 2 new mini 3D folders. And yes, there are more mini to come. So wait until you see, like Halloween, we did some of my favorite kind of steampunk ones in minis as well. Now we'll get on to the Impresslit. If you've been on social media this past week, you've probably seen this a lot. I know I have. It's unbelievable. This is a 3D Impresslit of a butterfly. And this was just something that was vintage. This was a picture. This wasn't actually even a product. It was literally a visual. And we wanted to replicate that visual in paper. And I think that, well, I think we've done that. So what is an Impresslit? An Impresslit is a 3D folder. So you're still going to get that detail and design, but it has a blade in it, right? It has a blade attached to the folder. So when you run an Impresslit through it, and it will say Impresslit versus texture fade, an Impresslit just means that it's got that die cut. It's going to impress and cut it out in the same pass. So you would still do 3 passes. It's the same sandwich you would use for your embossing folders, nothing different, but take a look at what you get. I mean, you talk about paper embellishments. I have a whole stack of them here. So take a look at this. I mean, shut up. See what I mean about that contour that a die gives, that curve? But even look at the detail in the body, the wings, every single, like there's even little lines that run through that detail. And this is just cardstock. You can use watercolor cardstock. You can use white heavy stock. You can use Yupo. You can use so many different things. And I'll show you some of my favorites. So this one is just white cardstock. And even then it's like, wow, impressive. It's just beautiful, right? This one is done on a piece of Yupo. Now Yupo is plastic. So spraying it would be kind of pointless because, I mean, you can if you feel good about it, but you don't have to spray non-porous things. You just want to spray porous things. But this is alcohol inked Yupo. And take a look at that. You can see that beautiful detail. And I just wanted to show you that. Like I'd probably rub over this with a little bit of maybe black archival ink to kind of bring out that detail. But I did want you to see that even on something like that, you would be able to get that texture. Now I will say on Yupo, Yupo wants to kind of relax the texture a little bit because it is plastic. So you will not get the same level of detail from Yupo to cardstock. Just keep that in mind, okay? When you get into metallics though, holy moly, stop it right now. Because you're getting reflection, you're getting shadows and bright, that's just magic right from the go. Now this is craft stock, right? So this is metallic craft stock. That's beautiful gold. Take a look at this onyx. I love that onyx black, just stunning. It looks like iron ore. It's just really, really beautiful, right? Now, another favorite, and I know many of you that use distress paint, you know our eroded metallic technique. We'll take a look at that. Eroded, yes, this is just paper. Could you do this out of metal? Yes, you can use thin craft metal and run this through and it will cut and emboss thin craft metal, but it has to be pretty thin. But why do that when you can replicate it on cardstock? So this is that eroded metallic that we do with distress paint and cut out of that paper. Isn't that beautiful? So amazing. So cool. And I like the fact that, of course, we can bend the wings up. We can have something dimensional. We can sculpt it. Well, you'll see the makes. Really beautiful. So that is the new butterfly. And then we've got this one. So Jen Long, creative director of Sizzix, came up with this idea, this brilliant idea. And I'll be honest, I didn't understand it at first when she pitched it to me because it makes no sense in my brain. This is a Switchlit. What is a Switchlit? Well, Sizzix likes a lot of things with lit. They have thin lit, Switchlit, Impresslit. That's just kind of their name thing. But a Switchlit is an Impresslit that is interchangeable or switchable. What? All right. So this Switchlit is a seal. And what it is a 3D folder. That is the 3D design, that raised ring with all those little dots. And then it has magnets embedded into the folder. So these, you can't even feel them. They're in the plastic. See, they're not even there. Now these magnets will allow you to switch out your die. So the cool thing is that you place this die and it fits right onto those 4 magnets. The 4 magnets hold it in place. You can see it circles the other part of that embossed design. And then you run it through like normal. And what's great about this particular design is it's a seal, right? It's got that round design. I'll show you kind of these samples. But you as the maker get to decide if you want to do just a solid circle. So maybe this is going to be a card embellishment. So take a look. It's going to, remember, it's going to cut and emboss. So this one, I just used the solid circle. So this is a great panel. You can put it on the front of a card. You can stamp a sentiment. You can put a little character in there, whatever you want it to do. But if you didn't want that edge, you could switch out your die. And now we have that wonderful vintage pinked edge, right? That nostalgic seal. I love that. So if you do like paper rosettes or anything like that, you can do that, or a scalloped edge, right? So if maybe you wanted to make a flower out of this, or maybe you want to use this as a coaster. Again, you're going to see the makers, they just took this to levels well beyond my imagination. Unreal, okay? Then, of course, if you just go old school and you use metallic cardstock, this is great for, you know, for your kids, for awards, or something for a teacher's gift, or maybe it's just going to be for a wedding favor because you're going to take this and maybe you are just going to simply make, you know, little coasters for a candle votive. Like, who knows what you can do, but I love the idea that from a simple design, you as the maker can switch it out to go from a solid cut line, a pinked edge line, or a scallop line, all while achieving that 3D embossing. Pretty cool, right? Very, very clever. I just think it's cool. It's just really neat. Something different that we like to do. So that is the release. That is chapter 3. Not a lot. I think, what was it, like maybe 9 or 11? I'm not sure the count. Not many, but the inspiration, abundant, right? So let me just throw all those in here. That's really how I like to clean up from a live, right, Mario? I just kind of throw it around. So yeah, thanks. Okay, are we ready? Hopefully, for the most part, you guys are going to remember the dies because I don't want to have to dig them out to show you. So you'll get it, and I'll totally help you. The first one we're going to talk about is the Perspective Moth. Now, a shout out to all the makers, and I'll talk about the makers. I will do a much better job this time with names, I promise.
Yeah, we perfected that.
Well, we hope so. We hope we perfected it. Yeah, because the makers have names. So just so you understand about the makers, I have many makers that I am fortunate enough to work with that will share their creative talents, and I'm so grateful to them. And I have different makers for different brands, and also different makers for different releases based on their schedule and all of that. But all of the makers that I work with are on timholtz.com on the makers page. So if you are ever inspired by this live or any previous lives from the makers, I encourage you to go to timholtz.com, click on the maker page, see the makers. They've got links to their blog and their social media. Follow them on Instagram. That's where you're going to get all of the tutorials and inspiration. Also, if you go following a live, usually by the end of the day, if not the day following a live, you will see photos of all these makes on timholtz.com. If you are able to click the link, that link will take you to that maker's tutorial. If it's not clickable, there's just not a tutorial. But really, share the love to the makers. And we have a lot of great makers. The makers will all be listed on the blog post, so you can follow them and know exactly who contributed. Oh, Mario's going to share that to the maker page. Thank you. So here we have a lot of different makers. This one is from Zoe Hillman. So we have two Zoes in this particular live. We have Zoe Hillman, Zoe Scarpelli. So this is Zoe Hillman. Zoe with a Y will be Zoe Scarpelli. That's going to keep it simple in my brain. So if it's just Zoe, Zoe Hillman, Zoe with a Y. See, I did that, right?
You did.
All right. So a shout out to Zoe for really creating Perspective Moth as kind of my opening because, well, she spelled it out. And I love seeing, again, That's what makes this perspective. The reason it's called perspective was because I knew that the shape, perspective butterfly and moth, was ginormous, right? And the whole thing about the ginormous scale of that is that you as the maker, if you were doing art journaling, sure, you could use the whole thing or a big canvas. But if you were doing smaller things like tags or cards, you're going to be forced to choose a perspective, right? You can have this off to the side like Zoe did. You could angle it. You can do so many different things with this. Now, this happens to be an etc. tag, right? It's got some wonderful texture on the background, but it even has some very cool grit on the top of this. I love how the wings are loose, so you can see that detail. I love how it's paired with just simple elements, like this is that little frame from the Matchbox, really cool. And this, of course, is Varsity. And take a look, there's some felt. It's cut out of felt, and it does give you the illusion that it's stitched. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but you can totally see that. And then, of course, any of your other favorite alphabets you can pair that with. But just a really cool make. I love seeing that just ginormous perspective moth. And there's so many ways. There's tons of makes. So we're going to get into to all the different makes that we're going to have. So Josh from Sizzix created this one. Josh and Pete, they are part of the Sizzix UK team. They do a lot of great stuff for them, so you can check them out on Sizzix UK site. This is really cool because, again, perspective. Take the moth going on a traditional card front. What are you going to do? Well, you can chop off those wings, right? So that just puts it in a totally different perspective and use it as a simple collage. That, to me, is fun. And you're going to see all these makes. There's so many different ways to continue to use the perspective moth. So this is Zoe with a Y. She created this little mini book. Very clever because that moth, you can see, just wraps around the entire book, right? Pretty cool from front to back. That kind of created the spine. And this little stitch book is so charming with all the little details, little ephemera. You can use stamps, ink, photo booth, clippings, a very cool way to incorporate a die cut. And I think what's really important about having so many different styles of makers is that you can use a die, of course, as a focal point, right? Focal point. You can also use a die as an accent in what you already do. So I think it's always important to understand anytime you watch videos from any kind of maker, whether it's ink or paint or whatever, you don't ever want to judge that, right? Don't judge what they're doing or what you see. Just pay attention to what is the potential of that product, and you can incorporate it into what you do. You may not like moth, so I'm not saying this is the ultimate die. But my point is, let's say you do journals and you're like, oh, I never do dies because they're too big for what I do, all that. This is a very clever way of incorporating a large die in a very artistic way by wrapping it around a book. And that's the thing that is so important to always remember when you're looking at makes. So this card, this is a shaker card. Kath created this one. Beautiful. It incorporates two of the new dies. First, we have that wonderful background die, right? You can see that she cut it, and then she also embedded it back in that piece of cardstock when she put it over the acetate. That's where the shaker comes in. Beautiful. And then take a look at that perspective. And I love the little embossing powder detail. Woo, right? So these would be the pieces, just so you can see kind of what she did. These would be the pieces that would normally be the fallouts, right? Right? So if you have those pieces that fall out, you can then go and emboss them and pop them back in, right? Or add some detail. Just beautiful. I love the element of this. I love the pop of color, the grunge, so many different ways that we can incorporate dies. Love it, love it. And everybody has a totally different style, right? So Jen created this, total color. I love this, Jen. Very, very cool to see how things are also incorporated, right? So these right here, these are the Ideology mini marquees. I love just the don't just fly. It's just beautiful. Soar, just again using stencil chips. But take a look at this. She used that perspective moth. Then she's got these solid wings. So I'm guessing that these were just hand cut to have that solid background layer. But I love how it's alcohol inked on acetate. Jen's a very colorful, sparkly maker, and I love that. I love that she just does her thing with these products. And that's the other important thing about makers, is just being inspired by their own unique style to do what they do. And what a great piece. This is an etc. tag, so it has that definite firm piece that you can just hang it on the wall or put it on an easel. Isn't that great? Love the sparkle. Love the color. I think the idea of layering it under the wings, just beautiful. Another wonderful, colorful maker is Keisha. I love how Keisha is a very vibrant, colorful maker, and I like really seeing the challenge, because she's always up to the challenge. So I love seeing how she incorporates things that are often vintage, but gives it her own unique, beautiful touch to it. And I love this card. I love the element because there is that perspective moth, but it's very, you can see it's got some white glitter on there. Really pretty, doesn't look grungy at all. I love the use right here. I mean, take a look at that. Now you can really appreciate the detail of that Varsity. So this is just the inside, not the outside of it. And then it's paired up with some Ideology quote chips, and I love the background, right? That inky background kind of looks like a little salty on the background. Just, it's so pretty. But what a stunning card to use that. Isn't that beautiful? Love it. And that's the thing to remember. The inspiration is just about continuing to do what you would normally do. Sharon, another colorful maker, right? Incorporating things in the way they would do that. So here is a beautiful, vibrant, inked background. And I love just seeing that thick, where it's just got many layers stacked together of that perspective moth. Just beautiful. I love the shine on there too. And that's one of the new stamps. There you go. Just love the whole look of that. Great collage background. And you can see, again, just from the different styles, just from these makes. I mean, there's many more that we're going to get into just for this one die. But you can just see already, like, potential, unbelievable. So many different styles, same shape, same design. So let's keep going through these, right? That perspective moth it's cool. That's what the inspiration is all about. Because oftentimes you're going to see it, and you're going to see that and go, I don't really know if that's kind of my thing. This one, love this. This is what I was telling you about. Nico created this one. And I love the fact that he took a card and decided just to cut off the body of that moth and create the bee, and just did BU. Isn't that's so clever? I just think it's really cute. I love that. Really a fun way to add some style. And using that Varsity font, see, it's interesting how it's just going to pop in to different kind of makes, different kind of styles. I think that will be really cool overall, just to kind of see everybody's different take, right? And it could be detailed. You can still use the shape just in a very simple way. If you're not into adding color, adding layers, Josh created this journal, just taking that and collaging it onto a journal with different papers and different ephemera. It can be as advanced or as simple as you want it to be. It really just depends on you as the maker and what your idea is. And that's the benefit of a lot of creative tools, stamps, dies, all of that, is they have the potential to kind of be whatever you want it to be. All right. So next we're going to get into some more artsy pieces. So Zoe created this one, and Zoe Hillman, you and your brickwork, I'm telling you, it's just magic. So if you take a look at this is an etc. tag, and I really love that technique that Zoe does of just kind of these eroded bricks just cut apart. It's the 3D folder, but I like how she just does it and then cuts it apart and just creates, well, magic. But take a look at this. I love seeing the moth on there, but there's a lot of details to this that I want to point out. So first of all, we've got the background that I mentioned, right? And I'll just give you a moment to take that in the same way I did, which is like, wazoo, unbelievable, okay? Then we've got the layer of the moth. And again, if you want to collage it down like Josh did on the journal, you can, or if you want to layer it up and just kind of leave the wings just kind of there, it does add a little bit of like wispiness to it, which I love. But take a look at that. There's the Switchlit. So if you were looking at that Switchlit earlier and you're like, oh, I'm not going to make rosettes and I'm not giving out awards or anything, it's still a very cool foundational piece for collage, because it gives you that anchor point to add stamped imagery, to add embellishments, and to layer another object on. So it's a very clever way to use that Switchlit. And then of course we see the circuit multi-level in the background. I love seeing that circuit embossing folder. It just gave perspective a very industrial vibe, right? And what was interesting is there's so many makers that kind of went that route with industrial. That's kind of why I saved them for now, because it's always interesting when I see this. I'm like, okay, there's a moth. Yeah, I saw it as, organic in nature, and yes, I love steampunk, but seeing it in so many different ways, unreal. So Vicky created these. These are both etc. tags. How she did this wizardry, I'm unaware, but there's a lot of cool elements on this tag. So first thing I want to point out, besides this really cool moth, is that she kind of tacked it in with vignette hardware, those nails. Take a look at that. So it's really kind of an industrial specimen. There's the countdown. Look back here again. See that? There's a Switchlit again. There's that seal. Another element, another anchor. And very interesting that two different makers use those dyes with this die, right? Who'd have thunk? Very cool. I love seeing that crackle in the back, right? Love that little crackle paste. It's really very cool effect. And then this, right? This, of course, is what I was talking about, that decorative trims die with the Stampers Anonymous, etc. trims. It adds that bulk, right? That thickness. And then just using some ideology machine heads where it just kind of has that hardware-esque. Those are just glued onto the top, so there's no holes drilled. But how cool to choose your pattern paper that's going to fit your make for that. Very similar kind of composition, but totally different effect in this one. I mean, look at this guy. This thing is like just totally gnarly. And I can't believe I just used that word in a live, but there's no other way to describe this. It's very cool. It almost looks, honestly, like it's just little bits of soldered metal. It's very metallic, very textured, very, I don't know, kind of shriveled up. I love it. But same thing, there's your crackle, there's the nails, there's our switchlet, there's that countdown number. That was from, I believe, chapter 2. And then you can see the trims. And that to me is really, you know, I'm always a fan of repetition as well, because that just shows that if you're a maker and you have an idea for, say, composition, right, where you like the idea of that switchlet and that number and that trim, you can totally change it up just by the effects that you give or the colors that you use. So it's just really, really remarkable just to see Zoe and Vicky, like just the kind of the steampunk vibe of perspective, right? You guys feeling it too? Yeah, I am too. I know. Yeah, you guys definitely ask nicely for a tutorial, right? That's important. Oh, cool. I can't wait. Yeah, I can't wait. Like, I can't wait to check it out. It's going to be cool. So Jan created this one. This is a much bigger etc. tag. If you're not familiar with etc., this is from Stampers Anonymous. It's a great thick foundation. Again, this is like a very heavyweight bookboard. It's not die cuttable. It already comes in these shapes. But take a look at this one, right? Here we can see things used in many different ways. We've got all of these wonderful gears. This is Sizzix. I think this was chapter 2, the mechanics. It might have been chapter 1. I kind of lose track. But take a look at those gears. These are all die cut, right? You would think, oh, these are the ideology metal. Yeah, there's one in there, sure. But that's another great way to use some ideology, combine it with Sizzix. There's that wheel. That was also ideology. But just the bit of grime and grit and grunge put on there. And then you can see, and again, a whole nother maker, totally don't meet together, used the switchlit. See? That's what, like, it blew me away where I thought, I mean, you're going to see some great ideas with switchlit, but that would be how I would expect it to be used. You know, kind of more like a prize or a note. But to see it in collage, it just made me, well, giddy last night when I was setting up. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And the irony of 3 different makers all doing something very steampunk and grunge and all incorporating that die with that die. Just blew me away. So there's a lot of ideology. Jan uses tons of ideology in her makes. There's like the backdrops. There you see the vignette. So I love just that addition of wood under there because that's going to be the charred wood. Those little type chips. I love that. And then here is where I was talking about creating those little shelves or ledges with the etc., right? So the nice thing about those trims is you can stack them up because they're different sizes, and then you can use another piece on top, there you go, to create those shelves. So simply by stacking it and then setting one on the top coming out, that creates a ledge if you're ever wanting to create those little shelves. And I like that because you don't have to go in and use, you know, wooden trim or anything like that. Just really cool. So take a moment and just like, let's just bring these into the shot because that right there, that's a money shot, guys. Isn't that? Just beautiful. So inspirational for, yeah, for a moth. All right, we've got another one. We just take these out. Thanks, Mario. Okay. All right, got a lot of stuff. So Juliana created this one, and I think it's just really beautiful because after seeing all the grunge and layers, I always want to make sure that these lives are full of inspiration for all different styles of makers. You don't have to cross over to the dark side and be, you know, grunge to really appreciate design. You can still use it your own way. So I love the inky background that she did. I love the contrast of seeing that just layered over white cardstock and just very simple. Let light lead the way. And I love just seeing the stamps. Of course, those are some vintage stamps. Those are the Halloween. I say vintage because it wasn't this year, but I think this was departed from last year. But great to see how these elements come together to create another art piece. So just remember that when you're seeing this, it's so beautiful. I mean, there is beauty in simplicity, and using the dies to always maintain your style. That to me is the most important aspect of a maker, is doing that. Beautiful, isn't it? Love it, love it. Okay. So much inspiration for the perspective moth. I do love that. So now we're going to get into, there was a lot. I mean, the great thing is the makers choose some of the dies that they want to work with. And sometimes we'll get a bunch of different makes for the die, and sometimes we'll get a few, but they're always incorporated in so many different ways. And that to me is ultimately just what I love about seeing these makes. So this one, Stacy created this, and I love just seeing that background die just used on this make, right? So you have that background die just as a background. That's all, it's all it needs to be, right? Inked and colored, beautiful little detail with stitching of the photo booth, some little trinkety bits, some little buttons, very beautiful, very vintage shabby. But what I was taken back by is not only were these pieces used in the background, but take a look at the side of the box, right? So that's when I was saying cut those pieces apart and utilize those and glue them on to create that texture that you would think to do it with texture paste, but because this is already inked as a background, you now get to use those elements. You also notice the trim, right? So this is an ideology vignette box that's just been turned so you have the flat side, but how clever to use those trim pieces to frame that box, to kind of give it a whole nother little lip or a little ledge around that vignette. I just thought that was really, really clever. And that little ideology vignette base, very cute, very charming. And I love just, again, I love the aesthetics and the color and the shabbiness of how those dies were used. And just that little piece, that little detail where it's not glued down, it's just kind of layered over. Beauty in the details. Zoe with a Y created this one. And again, if you look in the background, right, Zoe has that wonderful kind of grunge aesthetic. She does a lot of great videos on Instagram, so you can see the process. If you follow Tifa as well, Juicy Christian, same thing. Like, just I love seeing process videos even though they're sped up. So it's really important to follow makers so you can see that visual inspiration to understand how a technique is done. But here you have that background that is created using that same die, but obviously covered up with, you know, gessos and paints and crackles, and now it became much more subtle in the background. But again, two totally different makers, but saw that as like, okay, I'm gonna use it as a background, I'm gonna use photo. Just, it's mind-blowing every time. But isn't that cool? I love seeing it. Yeah, it's cool. And there's so many different backgrounds. I mean, Leafy Twigs is the new one, but you can go and see there's like tangled ones, there's flowers. So if you're into that and you haven't really got into background dies because you only see them as backgrounds, you definitely wanna make sure that you kind of see them a little different. So Josh created this card. Again, simplicity of just taking that colored cardstock, glue that down, and even though the die is a bigger die, it's for a 4 1/4, 5 1/2, you don't have to use it in its entirety. You can still use it on a card front and then cut off the edges, which is good, right? Love that look. And then of course we have this card. Pete created this card. Beautiful background. This of course is used, this was super clever. It took me a minute to figure it out because I'm like, wonder how he inked that. And then I looked at the corners, and that's when I noticed, wait a minute, these are two background dies, actually kind of changed the juxtaposition of one, but the top layer, this light green layer, he went and cut out the inside, right? So if you look at that, the dark green is the entire die, that's the background. And then he did another layer, inked it with different colors, but then cut out the center, so you have the dark kind of opening. I'm sure he changed the position of that, and then he let that shine through. I just think that's so cool. And because the background is so colorful and beautiful, just layering it on cream cardstock with a simple verse, like, that's it. That's what I'm saying. Like, so many different ways that you can look at a background die and see that and go, okay, I'm gonna layer the backgrounds. Okay, I'm gonna crop off the background. Okay, I'm gonna collage over the background. Okay, I'm gonna use the background as texture, right? I mean, there you have it. So that's really the benefit of seeing background dies used different ways. Beautiful. All right, moving on. All right, this next one, woo, this makes me happy, guys. It really does, because well, you could tell from the very beginning, I love this font. I love it. And I'll be honest, I didn't think the makers would. I thought the makers are going to be like, Tim, this doesn't go with anything, like, bleh. But I still loved it, and I was going to do it no matter. So really, again, a shout out to the makers, because when you see how they took it, they made me so freaking happy. So Debbie created this one. I used to work with Debbie Adams at Sizzix, and I love her vintage style and how she captures this. But I love seeing, again, look at that detail in the die. Very cool. And another tip, if you ever want your stitching, that would be that little cut, to be a color, remember you can ink your die with archival prior to cutting. So if you take, say, like black archival on the die and then you die cut it, it's going to deboss that color. You just want to hit the high points, of course, but it will deboss the color. But I'm not saying that's what she did, but that just made me think of that. But look at the detail of that stitching, that inked color. I love that she put it on this felt pennant that she created. I'm sure she just kind of hand cut this and just did her thing. Just love seeing the different pattern papers in the background, the little collage. And there's just so many bits here. I see things from, you know, Christmas paper packs and every day. And I love that. I think that's really fun to use. So I love seeing that vintage card. I know many of you saw this sneak. Kath created this one. Another great idea for this alpha, because if you take a look at it, right, here she used just the outline. Here there's the inside, and then that's layered. And I love how she just kind of switched out the color, because remember we talked about cutting at different colors. But then she used some other things, right? She used some stamps from Distinguished, Framelit. I think it's a great way to utilize this for a masculine birthday card. Love that, Kath. Very cool, right? Super clever to see the ways that a font could be used, right? So then Rochelle created this one. Totally different vibe, right? So we went from raw vintage, we went to, okay, that cool masculine, and now we're going into what? Vintage? Like, it's amazing. So Rochelle did this. Here's what I love about seeing this font, because if you look at this, it's done in metallic. So to me, right away, I visualize this more of a nice block font than I would like a Varsity font, if you would. But it still has all the great detail. The other cool thing, of course, is seeing those mini folders in play, right? When we talked about seeing it to scale on a card, that's really what I like, is that you can see the difference of that botanical, and that's just cut in half, and then the roses in the middle. And a beautiful card. Really, really cool. I love that. Then this next card, really fun, is from Anita. And I think, just look at that. This used a lot of different things, and I hope she's going to share a little tutorial on this fold. So here we have those stacked rectangles. So if you look at the card, all these little frames, that's all from that stacked rectangle, and the ability to cut those pieces out. And then she cut apart the embossing. So remember where I mentioned the importance of scale? The fact that you can cut out those embossed designs and actually show that off. And then we have just the congrats. But look at that. Look at that little tux that she folded in there with the little bow tie, and then down here. So this is like a wedding, like a congrats, because there's a little wedding dress she did. So clever, Anita. So clever, right? So when you see the stacked tiles, that is the benefit, that you don't have just one that you have to cut out again and again and again. You get to take 5 of those and get 5 shapes at a time of whatever size tile you need to do your layers. But really clever with the embossing folder and using those tiles as individual frames to really highlight just the detail that went on in those boxes, right? It's super clever. And I think that's great. Then we have Sharon. Sharon surprised me with this. I love it. This hey girl, hey. It's cut out of felt, pink felt of that. So of course Sharon's going to be like, oh yeah, you want to see something, Holtz? You watch. Stand back and watch. So here we've got, I love the gold sparkly accent around that, and this is that 3D crackle. What a cool background. I just think this card is really fun, and I love the contrast of colors, Sharon. I love the fact that we've got the black, the gold, and the hot pink. Again, a totally different vibe or aesthetic to that Varsity font, right? Sharon, that's right. Hey girl, hey, I just love it. I told you, like really, the makers just made me so happy with how they created this. It was just unbelievable. And this one, I'm telling you, this brought me right back to the 80s. I'm not gonna kid you. Keisha created this one, and this reminded me of, like, I don't know, what was it like? It was like studio hair gel. I don't know, something I used in high school, but these colors, like, it brought me right back, and I love it. I love the clean blocks, again, those are the stacked rectangles, guys. So seeing those rectangles and the ability to cut out those shapes out of solid pieces of cardstock, place it down over a base, leaving a gap in between, isn't that just a freaking awesome card? So good. And then pairing that font with another element, right? So these are the label stickers from Ideology, and then we've got that over the Varsity. I just think that it's such a cool card. I love the look of it. Really, really cool. Can you just, is that on low? Cool, thanks. Beautiful, just beautiful. All right, so next up, we have another card. Now this, I mean, this always surprises me, but when I see a maker that just jumps from one style to the next, I do a double take. So oftentimes I'll look, I'm like, wait a minute, who made that? So Debbie created this as well. So the same card, I mean, same maker that did this card, a whole nother take of that. And this, I would have to say, personally as a maker, I struggle with that. I like, to me, I kind of have a style. I like to just, that's kind of my thing. And so when makers have the ability to kind of morph themselves in different styles, I find that really, really impressive because I can't think that way. But I love seeing all these different blocks of color, just cutting out those letters, having those different panels. But then of course, inside we have shine, and then just good luck and shine brightly. Again, just using a stamp, using a little Ideology. I love the mix of those brands, but isn't that great? Just such a cool card. But there you can appreciate, there's the detail in that cutout, the different textures from textured cardstock to patterned paper to whatever, but again, color palette. And so seeing these two different color palette cards, that's what I hope you're kind of getting from this as I'm laying these down, that when you see that first font, you're like, not my thing. But as you see the different, it still may not be your thing. But I love seeing how they have such a completely different personality depending on the maker. This one definitely brought me a little chuckle. Sharon created this one, so thank you. I love the Team Tim. That's cool. But great idea for, you know, anyone that's still in school or college or reunion, or just, well, Team Tim, just to send that to a friend, because this totally made my day. And I love how it's paired in the back with the Stamper's Anonymous stamp, the pennant. So it's just a really sweet thank you card that, I mean, it's a make for the live, but it totally made my day, Sharon. So thank you. I love that card, but very cool. Love just seeing the simplicity of that. And I also thought it was very cool to kind of see that layered over the back. So this is just, if you can see, I don't want to ruin this, but there's like vellum overlay over the top of that, which kind of muted that background. I thought it was a really, really cool effect by stamping a piece of card, stitching a piece of vellum over the top to kind of diffuse the imagery, and then place that over it. So again, love that. Then as we continue on with the makes, we'll show you this one. So Rochelle created this, and this was really clever. No other word for it. It's super clever, because here's the thing. So we have that, of course, that Varsity, love the rainbow vibe, but using different cardstocks, take a look, that's the card front. She used that decorative trim just to cut that out of different colors and layer that on a card. So see, you don't have to always put those on the etc. pieces, but very cool nonetheless to see all those different patterns just cut out of different cardstocks, sanded and layered, and then put that on a card front. Really, I just thought it was brilliant. I love the idea behind that. And then I love just kind of pairing up how she paired up those colors with the Varsity. Isn't that really good? And then of course, that's the nice thing about the Varsity letters. And you've seen how people have used it. That little trim detail, yes, you're gonna have to cut it a second time to get that different contrasting trim, because it's gonna only cut it out in the same color trim, but you can see the impact it makes when you're able to add that little detail. And this, of course, if you see it, I'll hold it, it's all flush. So again, it's not like the shadow where you can stack it. Those are still great dies, because I do love shadow dies. I've designed some myself where you want the ability to layer. But this one, I definitely wanted that little bit of that nested kind of nostalgia. But another great card, right? Isn't that amazing? All right. We have one more make using this alphabet. This is from Emma, and it was just so cool, right? Class of 2021. So if you have graduates, maybe there's a school mascot, maybe it just happens to be a colorized die, but this to me was brilliant in many ways. So first, I'm just going to talk about the shape, right? So when I picked this up, I'm like, oh, it just kind of looks like a shield. I'm trying to hold it far enough that you can see the shape. And really, it's just Emma turned that etc. tag upside down and created a totally different look, just like a pennant, right? I love the look of that. Then we've got that class of 2021. You can see there's our colorized, there's Harrison, but also those trims. So here you can see the importance of having pattern paper and the ability to cut a coordinating pattern. And she used it on all those trims to create that little ledge, also create that top portion. There she's got Harrison, his name on there. It's just really, and I love these dies. Of course, these are some of the older stitch dies, but again, it's good to mix old and new. That's why we invest in supplies, right? I mean, the idea is that we utilize those. So older stamps, older dies, it's always great to see them come together in full form. And so you look at all these cards and you see everything from, you know, vintage to birthday to, you know, love to wedding to cool, colorful friend vibe to vintage vibe to team to hey girl, and even something for, of course, the varsity look of that with the class of 2021. It just, I told you, blown away by the ideas of a font, guys. A font, one alphabet. Like, you think about that as a maker and the challenge that they get where they have this alphabet. They're like, okay, how am I going to create something with it? And just seeing so many different ideas, that's what it's all about. I'm so grateful to the makers for sharing their brilliance and just allowing me to share it with all of you in the lives, release after release, because that to me is what always brings a product immediately to life, is seeing how it can be used. So beautiful, right? So cool to see them all, isn't it? Unbelievable. It is inspiring. That's what these are about. Some people just don't get it. You know, some people just think it's all about like a product launcher, like, yeah, no problem. It's like, okay, but to me, you're kind of missing the what really your product is kind of has the capability of doing, right? So this card, Kathy created this, and I wanted to talk about this because really this is about taking a single die and utilizing it with older stuff, because the only thing new on this card is this rectangular die, but these other elements are older releases, and that's what I loved about seeing how Kathy used it. So creating these little frames, so here you're taking that stacked rectangle, cutting the solid, that's going to be that blue background foundation, also taking that same rectangle, cutting out a background. So this was, I think this was Blossom or something, I'm not sure of the exact name, but this was another background die, it just happens to be a flowery one. Cutting it out, gluing those together, and then using those two different size rectangles to create frames to glue on top. So she really created these little framed panels and then used that multi-level embossing folder on the back. So older embossing folder, older die paired with the new, and that right there is magic. That's what it's all about. It's great to see all the release and you're like, oh, I want it all, I need it all, but it's really about saying, what are you going to use? And if you don't have the budget to do it, what could you put to use? And shapes like this really give, I think, older dies a whole new look and feel, a whole new life. But this was a great idea to cut out those background pieces and just use that for the pop of color. So excellent, really fun. All right, moving right along. We doing okay, Mario? Trying to monitor the chat. Thanks for sharing all the love to the makers, you guys. I really appreciate it. I know they do as well, so it's cool to see. So next we're going to talk about potted. Now, of course, potted 2 is that steel rule die. And so now you're going to see how those makers really put the fact that it's a steel rule die kind of to their advantage. And I'm going to share, there's a lot of makes to show you that. There's a lot of makes over here. And I'm going to talk about each one because there's a lot of different details to it. So Kath created this etc. tag, right? And you can see here, let me just try to hold this up. Okay, can you see that? So that is done out of a thicker chipboard, the benefit of a steel rule die. But then also using kind of that enamel grunge technique just to give that pot that really cool enamel patina. I love seeing the transparent wings from Ideology. And there's where you can see those stem dies. That's the benefit of that. Any wildflower, any larger stem die, you're able to put that in. And to me, it's definitely more in proportion to it than having just a little squatty bucket at the bottom. That's the benefit of the top of it. But also if you look at the background, take a look at these wonderful little grungy collage panels. There is that rectangle die again. So when you see those stacked tiles and you're like, I don't really know if I'll use it. Once you do use it, I think you'll think, wow, gosh, I definitely love the idea that I can do one background, lay a bunch of different tiles, and in one pass, I have all my collage pieces, right? I'm not running that through many times, but look at all the detail in there from the little mummy cloth. That's a little bit from Halloween. And you can see the little stickers, You can see ephemera snippets. Just there's so many details that you can add to any kind of die cut work that you want to do. That's what it's all about. It's really about you just kind of doing your thing. Juliana created this. This is a slimline card. It's really interesting to see this. I was kind of taken back when I first saw it. I'm like, how did she do that? And then I really looked closer because, as I said, when I set up, I don't really look, but now I see it. Because I thought, oh, that can't be my folder. And I see now that it is. There you go. Good job, Holtz. So this is taking that mini botanical, but if you look, it's actually seamed. And maybe she doesn't want me to point this out, but I think seeing the mechanics is really important. So by taking that panel and making multiples, this visually looks like an all-over embossing, right? Looks like the entire thing because it's just so seamlessly done. But when you look close, I love how it's just stitched together and beautiful. So here you can see on potted 2, it has that look of a galvanized bucket. And you remember in the samples, I use these straps on the wooden one. It doesn't mean you have to. You still get to do what you want to do. But another great thing about potted 2 from a scale is those funky insects, right? The bee like this one or the dragonfly. You want to now incorporate that into your flowers. It's not going to look like just a monster insect. It actually looks proportionate. And you can see all the different greens and the flowers that you can have come out of the buckets. 2 totally different looks. But that's the benefit of this particular design in a steel wool die. I mean, I know I have people going, you should do a milk can and you should do this. It's like, right, but then it's just a milk can. At least as potted, you get to take that shape and you can customize it and make it different each time. This one's super clever. Nico created this, and I love, again, seeing a die cut, a vessel, being used as a focal point for a stamped image. So if you're a Snarky Cat fan, I thought this was really fun. This just using the stickers, you are capable of becoming more than you realize. Cultivate kindness. What a great use for a card by taking that Snarky Cat and having him come out of the pot. And there you go. That's just using the lumber embossing folder to create a little wood grain effect, to create a tall barrel. Isn't that cute? Very cool. Just, yeah, I know Ted. Ted's like, I love the kitty. Of course you would, Ted. But Ted loves everything. I know he does. He should. It's good because creativity, that's the thing. When you see a design being used so many different ways, gosh, you can't help but be inspired, right? I can't. I think that's really cool to see the Snarky Cat come out of that. Pete from Sizzix created this. So here you can go a total monochromatic look by just going full on metallic. There you can see that mini embossing folder, that botanical in action again. Scale is everything. But what I really liked about this is that he took a lot of the dies that are tall stems, and because he wanted it to go on a card, there's nothing wrong with cutting those stems off, having them kind of come out of the pot, draped over a little different, and you can see that background die used on the back of this card, and I love seeing it layered on that corrugate. But again, if you don't want to go in and do the coloring because maybe that's not your thing, you can still utilize those same dies, right? Because they're the same dies used, just done in your style. That is what it's all about. Style is everything, right? Am I right, Anita? Anita is not afraid of color, and I love seeing just her splash of color. I love seeing these big red flowers, and I really love the modern spin that you gave on this. You're the only one to do that, and I think it was really clever to see that. It reminds me of Beetlejuice because I love that black and white. But here you can see how she took that, put it on that little ledge. That's the beauty of the trims. You look at the back, this happens to be an Ideology vignette tray. And so I really love the vibrant, colorful look of these flowers on that whole black and white background. So there you can see collage paper just used on the vignette. I love that it's trimmed in black. You see the hardware and really see those dies in that splash of color, kind of like red poppies. And then seeing, of course, the Ideology entomology adornment. Nice. Isn't that cool? And that is the beauty of a die, right? You get to just pour your personality into that shape and do what you created. I just think it's so cool to see the stripes used, and that's all part of the die. So she cut those strips, which is the kind of the breaks that are in that die that I used. I think it was on the metal one. So I love that it was just really brilliantly done because I couldn't paint lines like that. So that was cool. Another clever use of potted in a totally different theme, Yuko created this, is very beachy, right? Do the whole vacay. So taking lumber as a background and creating kind of driftwood beach. She wanted these to look like, you know, metal pails, and you can see the seashells and sand dollars in here. A very cool look to take something, well, I always saw potted as very gardeny, right? I mean, you've seen a lot of stuff with flowers, but to take that in a totally different approach and create this cool effect where it just looks like, you know, dented, hammered metal pails. And I love seeing that little jute going around. That's a Stampers Anonymous mini blueprint, that little sand dollar right there. She utilized that same thing to cut a found relative photo, just to incorporate that and just do a wall hanging for a beach house. Just think it's a very clever way to use that die and just incorporate it in a completely different theme, a totally different aesthetic, right? That's what it's all about. Sharon created this. This is just an art panel, like a canvas panel, but this is really where you can take that vessel and use your favorite inked papers, colored cardstocks, whatever you want to do, and really make a statement with that piece, because you can see it's big. So you can use this on a card, as I mentioned how Pete did something small. So you look at that and go, oh, it would never fit on a card. Sure it would, but it would also be to scale or proportionate with something big like this. And I love seeing all those beautiful, vibrant colors all layered and stacked together. And it's so nice to have a vessel to put them in now. That's what it was. That was the inspiration. You know, usually, I mean, rarely do I do kind of a version 2 of a die unless it just has so much potential if the scale had changed. And that really was what potted was for me, is just kind of seeing that going, okay, we need something for these big pieces, because a lot of people, I mean, there's great ideas, but it's really important to see them use completely different. All right, let me clear this up. I've got one more to share with you. I don't want it to fall off the table. Thanks, Mario. And this one, well, when you see it, you'll know why I'm a little partial to it, just because, well, it's Arizona. So Kathy created this, and this was really great because it's a vignette tray. Love all the crackly bits, but she was the only maker that saw this with cactus. Well, because she lives in Arizona as well. But I love seeing that potted used to create a very eroded bucket. Very cool galvanized bucket with, like, you know, leather straps like you'd see in Arizona. And I love the funky cactus in there. That color palette, whoa. And then you can see these are mixed media dies. These are older ones, but the cool thing about mixed media, of course, is that you can cut them apart. This just mimics chicken wire. So she did some embossing powder to make it look like metal, but it's really just cardstock. And those are all the fragments. Such a classic die. I love it. And I love just how she used, this was really brilliant. So the pieces, right? The pieces on potted, these little curved pieces, she utilized those to create that Arizona, right? Look at the background, look at the brown. So that shape for the A and that shape for the rest, I think that was really brilliant to use that piece as kind of the foundation to create that curve. Isn't that clever? That's a really great use for this just on a card. If you have, you know, the bold text, that die, that's a great alphanumeric die, and you just wanted to create that kind of subtle arch on a card, utilize that piece. I thought very, very clever. So amazing, right? To see how the makers just use so many different dies, old and new, in different ways. I hope you guys are inspired. I sure am. Like, just the colors of this one, yeah, it's the Arizona guy in me. That's what it is. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful detail. I agree. Yeah, I'm just gonna hold that up just so you can see the colors. Because it just, that on the whitewash, can't get enough. That's what it is. All right. Next, we're going to move on to Matchbox. And when you see this, you guys better just buckle up. That's all I'm going to say. Buckle up for this one. Because, well, it's just everything. Okay. I'm prepping over here. There's a lot of little boxes that I want to take out. So I want to make sure that I can do everyone justice on this. All right. So when it comes to the Matchbox die, right? So these, Nico created these, and here's a little series of them. So remember, when it comes to creating this, that you are building the Matchbox. And so there are things that you can do to this if you choose to. One, of course, sewing. Now, you could sew directly on the paper and glue it down, but because this wrap is separate, you could also sew directly on it. I believe he just glued it on, but whatever it is. I will tell you this, though. Anything that you plan to embellish on the sleeve, you need to be careful, because you're still doing a drawer. And so that means, like, let's say you're going to do brads or fasteners through this. You want to make sure that whatever's on the inside is not going to catch on those when you do your slides. So, you know, essentially, if you're going to embellish the sleeve, you probably want to do most of it on the top of it, unless you don't plan on it sliding out. But this is what I thought was really very clever. using the circles, and of course these are the circles that come with it, but didn't cut a window, just used them more as the seal, and then used the Varsity, right? But all of these are little collages. So I'll just kind of pop this out just so you can see. Look at that. This was back in the day when we did mini paper dolls. We don't do paper dolls in this scale anymore. I think we need to again because they're so cute in these little matchboxes. But he did a little collage in each one. So this one is My Heart's Desire. And the beauty of this, remember I told you about the friction, is that you can slide that and you could stand it up if you wanted it to be an art piece like that. But there are the transparent wings in the back. And he just did each of these little boxes. There's another one. Happy in Her Heart. Isn't that cute? Dimensional, little background. So cute. And take a look at that one. Really, really cute. I love that. Love just seeing the Matchbox just used in just a great collage way, right? Little pocket collages. Very, very clever. And this, of course, could be just anything on the front, but what a great little gift, right? Very cute. You guys just have no idea. Just the versatility of a Matchbox. I'm blown away. Zoe created this one, steampunk. Look at that grit grunge on there. So here she cut out that window. Love a little grit paste, but this is just something that, like, love the little detail, right? The embossed, but this is really a shadow box. So this isn't something designed to open and close. I mean, I'm sure you could open it, but I love just seeing just all the little mechanics in there, right? You can see that circuit folder in there. I love just seeing all those little fan blades and cogs. Very, very steampunk. Just, I love the aesthetic of that. I love seeing the cracked leather texture, a little bit of ideology, but a great way to take a Matchbox and use it as an industrial element, right? Kind of that gauge box or anything that you wanted to use in your collage work. And the fact that you are constructing this, that is what's giving you the ability to go in and change all of those little detail elements to make it exactly what you need for your make. So that to me that's really important. I'm going to see how many I can kind of keep within the frame. So this next one, Yuko created this, and this is one of those kind of double side of this, very clever. And so here's the thing about this. So this is an etc. tag. She used those trims to stand it up, but I'm going to just show you both sides because this uses the die that we did, I think in chapter 2, was in the park. So you can see there she is right there. There he is right there. This one is a great stamped background. This background, you can see all those twigs in the back. But here's what is also created. So you can see these edges. Of course, those are the trims with the paper. That's using the decorative trim die. But if you look at both of these, you see these little suitcases? Yeah, suitcases out of Matchbox. Now, there's the drawer that she used as just kind of a little shadow box. Here's the suitcase. Now, this is baggage claim. So these little elements, a little strap and the handle, this was a Biggs die. Gosh, I think baggage claim was maybe last year. But these little suitcases actually pull down. There's a little magnet. And take a look at the detail in there. There's a stamp in Impresslit. There's a little sticker that says My Heart's Desire. There's where she used the seal. There's the embossing folder in there. So there's so much detail packed into this make when you look at it, right? This die, this background die, the embossing folder, the framelit, the little ideology, using the ring in there, and then there's that little magnet that when it closes, it just latches in there. Isn't that really clever, right? And the other side, same thing. So there we have our little drawer. We have the stars. There's that suitcase with the cracked leather. And when we open this, very cool how we've got that hat and the collar. Isn't that great? The traveler. So just a very clever use of taking that Matchbox and just making these little magnetic suitcases. And yeah, you could keep that in where you could slide that out. But I also like just utilizing that piece. You're going to use your Matchbox die just as a shadow box. Right? You may create this and don't even do the wrap for it. You might just want to add all those little boxes on there, right? Paula did one with the ideology one where she just used all sorts of Matchboxes as shadow boxes. So a lot of great ideas for incorporating a Matchbox into something totally different. So Zoe with a Y created this one. This is just utilizing this, but instead of gluing and having that matchbook slide out, she left this tab, sewed the paper. You guys ready for this? Take a look at this little mini book, right? So that is the Matchbox. That's the drawer. This is the wrap, but the wrap isn't glued. right? So you could do a magnet like Yuko did, you could do Velcro, or it just sits closed. Like you don't necessarily need a fastener. She did have a wrap around here. She had like a little string and a charm, but for the live, I just took it off. But you can see that it's using abandoned paper. That's the other thing, right? You don't always have to use craft stock. You can use your pattern paper sewn on there. Love seeing the ideology stencil. Love seeing a bottle cap as an element, some mummy cloth in there, some field notes ephemera. And I love just seeing the stitching on that. And then you could add just little details with washi tape, right? But what a great idea to create little mini books out of a Matchbox, right? See, suitcase, mini book, wow. Just, it goes on and on, I'm telling you, it goes on and on. So Stacy created both of these. I love these little vignettes. So yes, the Matchbox can be functional. It can be maneuverable if you want, but you can also just create these that can sit here, right? Now, can these close? Yes, you can close the drawer, you can tuck it in, but inside these, I'm just gonna take this out. First, I just wanna show them to you before I start to disassemble them, okay? Great use for all the different backgrounds, distress. Love seeing how paper dolls are cropped off. So keep that in mind, even though it's a paper doll, you can still use it and cut off the rest of the bodies. Utilizing clipping stickers, using a little hitch fastener. Again, there's a couple makers that use hitch fasteners as like little drawer pulls. But then inside this, of course, you can take out and it will house little mini books. I mean, come on, come on. So this is just using some of the fabric tape. I love seeing there's that circle. That's that die that comes with the Matchbox, but cut out and use as an embellishment. And then all of these little details, there's the little number dies that also come with the Matchbox. So when you're looking for little numbers, that's another benefit. So just the bonus dies of this Matchbox die is really cool. And I love seeing all of these wonderful little paper dolls, ephemera, die cuts, just very cool, very collagey that just fit in there. And then it can slide into that Matchbox. So yes, you can slide it all the way closed, but I also love that it can just be displayed like that with some of that. So, you know, so the recipient knows that there's something that's going to come out of this, right? So here you have this. I love seeing the details of the metallic, a little bit of mica, die cuts. There's a little bit of ribbon. I like that it's kind of a masculine, feminine style of the same idea. But there again, just using little ephemera bits like field notes, the numbers tucked in there. This one has that beautiful mica overlay, but all these backgrounds. So if you do backgrounds and you're looking for things, it's a great way to incorporate your backgrounds is with your die cuts and create these. I love these little mini books, right? Really, really cute to see those just in the box. And you know, I know a lot of people like to create a book that's attached to this. So you could create an accordion book that could be attached to this, but I also love the fact that I can take it out and just, you know, hold it in your hand because you get really appreciate like just all the little tiny details of that. And there's so many different beautiful details in here, from the dies and little butterflies, the tinting of the paper dolls. Just see, magic, magic. All right, this one, just again, speaking of magic. So Zoe created this display dome, and I'm going to try to show you because it has a light, but this is the display dome from Ideology. And what's amazing, it has tiny lights, of course, because I do love when something lights up. But take a look at that. So Zoe created this Matchbox, used the dimensional dome, right? So what I talked about at the beginning, but then used the field notes ephemera, sculpted that little moth, glued that in there, and then illuminated the bottom with tiny lights. And you can see on the outside, there's like twigs and lichen. It's kind of a very cool like specimen dome. There's a little figure 1 label, but this thing, look at that. That is freaking awesome. I love that. And I love seeing that Matchbox used inside a dome. Did I design it to fit the dome? I'm going to say yes, but the answer, not really, but I'm happy to see that it did. Because again, I told you so many times with makers, they just use it in ways that was never even crossed my mind. And now that I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, there we go. Matchbox in a dome all day long. And the fact that you can just illuminate it, just brilliant. Very cool. So you just imagine the themes that could go on in here. You could do, you know, beach, nautical, Christmas, right? So back in the back could be like a snow globe with glitter and shaker, and you can have a little woodland tree. There's so many different spins of utilizing this idea. So a very brilliant idea for taking that. I just love the detail, right? And you can see, you know, that little edge, you see that little ring that goes around? To me, it's that finishing touch that's incorporated in those thinlits that come with this die, because you do want to kind of finish that, because that draws your eye around that bubble of that dome. Really cool. Love it. I'm going to leave that on. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'm going to leave it on.
Really good.
I think so. Yeah. And then we have this make that Kath created, and I was like, I don't even know how much time this would have taken. So Kath created an entire sewing vignette out of matchboxes. And here's the part that really blew me away. Do you see all the buttons and everything in the drawers? She glued it in. It's like, what? Because she probably knew that it wouldn't really make it in one piece. But take a look at all the detail. So Matchbox, there's the Varsity that she did, the word sew. She created all these drawers, and these drawers are like fabric wrapped using the Ideology linen tape, so they're actually covered in fabric. These are old ring fasteners from Ideology. You can see there's an Ideology buckle, just mixed in with all these other findings, the little buttons, the little lace trim. There's some of the quote flare on there. And then you've got spools that are wrapped in the Ideology velvet ribbon. I love that. The little head pins. Again, another button there. And then there's one of these drawers, and that's the cool thing about creating that window. So remember, it doesn't have to have the dome. This one doesn't have a dome. This you can just cut and glue a piece of acetate inside, and then it will show off whatever's inside. The base of this, you guys have seen a bunch of these. These are the etc. tags. So when you're looking for kind of that foundation, that's kind of the great thing about an etc. tag, is that it's just a nice, sturdy base. So we've seen it as a foundation like Kath used, as a tag. Emma used it upside down kind of as a pennant. But I love that it's just wrapped. So even though these come, I'll flip this over, with that hole, you could cover it up. Like most of them did, covered it up, and you don't have to use it as a tag. But look at all that detail of incorporating a matchbox into a sewing thing. I mean, sewing thing, a specimen, a little mini book holder, a mini book in and of itself, something with steampunk with all the gears and make it rusty and crusty. Utilizing it as making a suitcase out of it with a little magnetic closure, or creating these charming little vignettes to have little photos. Or, I mean, this could be party favors where you can have, you know, a childhood photo of the guests. I mean, you could do a lot of fun things with the Matchbox. It could be so many different favors, right? But this last make, like, I don't know. I'm just going to say that I don't even feel that I'm worthy to be showing a make like this, to be honest, because I can't even imagine the time that it took. But this is what was sent to us, right? And these are from Vicky. And I couldn't even wrap my head around it. So you'll see what I mean, okay? So this is what was sent, okay? And if you look at them, they look like old brass blocks. Well, they feel like old brass blocks. I put them in a wood box. Well, presentation is everything, you guys. You know that. So you look at the finish, this grungy metallic finish. Okay, this is paper. And I really hope there's a tutorial on this, because I want to learn this. The numbers have been cut out, right? So this looks like these have been engraved into this paper. So it's cut out and then that piece is put in. So there's obviously another layer behind it that's holding that in there. And all of these have a number. There you go. You can kind of see. See how it looks just carved out? And there's some grit paste in there. All right. So many of them. But then you'll also notice that each one have these little hitch fasteners, right? And the amazing thing about this is that inside each one, are you guys ready? Okay. It is a resined capsule. What? Yeah. A collage in every one, and I'll open each one, that is encased in resin. Yep. Findings, ephemera, games, all sorts of just beautiful little collage pieces that can be revealed. They can be displayed. You can take this and stand this up behind it or next to it. I mean, there's so many different unique things, but to put resin in there, I was shocked of how you're able to create resin, pour it into something, and still make this actually fit, I guess. I guess for me, that was the thing I was most shocked about. Like, how did she even get it to close? Because I would think I'd pour it in and the walls of the box would spread open. And all right, so take a look at this one, right? With that gear, you got the entomology, you got the little tiny clip under there. And to get the resin so it sits right at the top of the box, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, I appreciate this so much. There's no way I would have the patience to make these so perfect, but really it just comes right to the top. And the box, I mean, it looks like metal, but it just, I don't know. Maybe it is metal. I don't know what this is. It just looks like metal. Maybe it is. It's just amazing, really. On each one is just like, are you kidding? Right? I know. Yeah, Tifa said, and no bubbles either. And this one, like, take a look at that. So there's mica in there. So look at how I love his photo under there. But then when you like tip it, it's kind of like shattered glass because there's mica that's floated inside. And then you can see there's like remnant rubs in there. There's so many little elements and details. Just, oh my gosh. So cool, right? All right, put this one back. I want to take good care of each one. All right, 2 more. Unbelievable. Look at that. So this one, salvage doll, those of you, that's a dimensional doll from Ideology. She got a little crown on there. There's one of the flare. There's a little story stick, a little key, one of the Ideology frames. I don't know. I kind of think I need to get into this whole resin thing because that's my jam. But it's like crystal clear. I need to know what resin you use because that is like legit stuff. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that, you guys. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I see all the comments. I agree. Like but I mean, all these makes, they're all next level. Every idea is brilliant. It's how you see it. So that one has like, looks like glitter or mica float in there. I love the 7. I love the little lucky clover. Again, so much Ideology. It just makes my heart super happy, right? Love it. Just really cool to see all of these different boxes. I mean, and you can see, that's what I'm saying. Like, the level of brilliance in all of these makes, you know, whether you're creating displays or scenes or vintage elements, or you're going to really utilize just a box. I mean, I say just a box because really as a designer, it is just a box. You could do whatever you want with it, but these are things that I just never just dreamed that would happen from a Matchbox, right? And that's really what I hope that you guys are continuously inspired by these lives, because a lot of time and effort from just the whole team really go in. And I know that the makers are always trying to knock it out of the park, and they kind of feel the pressure. I hope they never feel pressure, because I hope that they feel, and I read the comments that all of you guys make and how you celebrate each and every maker, because there is not one idea better than the next. There isn't. They're all amazing in their own right, because that is the beauty of all of that. It's really cool. All right. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, thanks, Mario. We're moving on. All right. Next, we're going to talk about some 3D. We're going to do some Impresslits. Very cool to see different use for 3D. A lot of times, you know, when it comes to 3D is great as an accent, but not often 3D gets love as kind of its own thing. Pete from Sizzix created this whole series of cards, and I want to share them with you because I think it's really great to take a design and simply by changing the finish, change the entire look of what it is. So these are all just mini cards. Again, just using that mini rose 3D. Little ink blending over white cardstock. Embrace the space, leave some of that white showing. Or when you ink it heavy, it really starts to pick up color on that embossed area, splatter with a little water, right? Really creates that rich darkness. I love this one, just seeing that metallic wash over it, and then just kind of that eroded bit near the bottom. Just very cool to do that with paints or waxes. There's a lot of different elements that can create a beautiful metallic look to it, but again, it's the eroded detail. That's what I love. Or going on black and then dry brushing a color to make it look like patina over black cardstock, or just taking black cardstock and dry brushing a color on there. But if you look at these, I mean, isn't that so cool to see the same folder, the same design, have so many different looks to them? That is the power of Sizzix, really. Taking a die or an embossing folder and being like, okay, wow, wow, wow. Seeing all of those different styles. All right. Next, you can see this one. Anita just always, really, she always surprises me with just what she uses because I never think of it and I always love it, right? So this, all metallic. This made me look at this folder in a totally different way, as if it was like pressed into metal or foil. So taking the Ideology metallic cardstock, you can see there's that background die used again, and then there are the rectangles, right, kind of cut out. And then you can see on the back, she took that folder, but she kind of cut it apart, right? So even though it's that one mini folder, obviously the folder itself is small, but because we have those windows, you can then emboss and cut it and move it into the panels that you want it to be. So taking a mini and kind of expanding it, I thought that was a very clever use for that mini folder, and then having all those windows reveal snippets or portions of that embossed design on a card. I love it. It was really, really clever. And just seeing how these are used. Kathy created this collage, right, on a panel. So think about that with an embossing folder. Sure, it can be a focal point on a card. It can be an element that you cut apart, but it can also be a collage element. So even if you're using crackle paste with a stencil, using Ideology, using your embellishments, your pins, you can still use that embossing folder right there as just part of the collage. I think that's really, I love the look of that. So very cool, Kathy, just to see an embossing folder just used as part of a collage. That's what it's all about. It's using the things how you would use it as a maker. And it doesn't always have to be that one use, right? When you're inspired by the idea, it doesn't just have to be that one use. It could be so many different uses. All right. So next we're going to talk about the Switchlit and how that was used in different ways. So Audrey created this card. So here you can see there's that leaf background. You can see some other dies, whether you can use funky leaves, you can do all sorts of things. There's the Varsity in there. But I like how that Switchlit is really used as a focal point on a card. I mentioned to you that that circle can still be used. You've seen it done in collage with steampunk and perspective moth. You've seen it as a background layer, but this can also be the focal point. So if you have a card and maybe you have a sentiment, maybe it's a die cut, maybe it's a stamp, maybe it's an embellishment, this will allow you to put that down and really draw your eye into that focal point of a card. And I love the colors that Audrey used. I love the background of it. And I just think it's fun where she's got the different typography of howdy, hello, and hi, just to layer on that. Really, really cute, cute, cute. So I just think that, you know, seeing that, very cool. Then this card, Tammy created this. I love this. This is actually, well, this is just a card for us, but it was so cute that I still wanted to put it in the live because I thought how charming to see that little embossing folder in the background and seeing that seal out of pattern paper, right? That's something that I thought was really unique because you were able to take one of the Ideology backdrops and really kind of focus or highlight that particular design in that Switchlit. See, and just by changing it to kind of that scallop, it really gave it a beautiful little garden vibe. A little Ideology metal butterfly, the metallic sticker, just such a cute card that she made. So hope you don't mind, Tammy, but I need to share it because I'm like, that's just cute just to see that out of, I mean, cards using it, but plain paper, pattern paper, you still get to use it, and it's just a clever way to use that Switchlit. Again, so many different ways to see how they're used. Then Audrey created these little treat bags, and honestly, this is how I envisioned, at least in my mind initially, that Switchlit. I kind of saw it as like, okay, it's a focal point, but it's also kind of like this medallion, seal, kind of prize ribbon. So I like seeing all of these, I don't know, makes used as that focal point for the Switchlit. So this, of course, little treat bag, little candy. We've got that little ribbon on there, just cutting some little tails, use the vintage Varsity. I like seeing that Switchlit used right there. Very cute little candy sticks and just put in a bag, right? So whether that's for a birthday, an anniversary, team activity, whatever, just adding 2 strips of paper or even ribbon if you wanted to, you can customize great little gifts. I thought that was cute. It's a very clever idea for using that Switchlit because you have the ability to layer and change. And you'll see on both of them, right? Scalloped edge, pinked edge. So remember that. You have the ability to switch it out. So even if you're making the same thing, you don't have to do the same thing. You can just, I love the layers, the detail of the fabric, the little stitched on button. There's so many cute details. The stamped bag. I don't know, it's just charming because that's a stamped bag because the bag itself was plain. Really cute, the candy sticks. And seeing treat bags, I mean, that was another thing. So here we have maker, we have Audrey that created these, and then Stacy created her own treat bags as well. She created like little bags. I don't even know what's in it. Probably not treats, but they're still cute little burlap bags with these wonderful little tags. Now, here's what's charming, using stamps inside here, right? I think it's a floral outline stamp. It looks just like part of that new stamp. And I love seeing how this is done. Now, where do you see this other idea? I hope Stacy's going to do tutorials on this, because the ideas for this also, like, I think Paul and I were just talking about it last night when I was setting up. I'm like, okay, you need to explain this to me. So the cool thing about this, of course, is seeing the color that's debossed around there, that black edge. Then there's a stamped image inside, that little verse on there. And again, that idea, customizing it, just changing, switching out the outline of the die. That's the beauty of a Switchlit, but creating the same thing. So yes, these are on a bag, they're great, but these would be ideal in the front of a card. These could easily just be little card medallions that go right in the middle of a card, right? So cute. And I love just seeing that little color in the middle and just that stamp. So I'm sure, hopefully Stacy will share the details, whether she masked it or not. Great. Coming. Oh, great. Thanks, Stacy. Because this next one, honestly, Paula had to walk me through it and I still didn't get it. And then it finally clicked, because wow, this must have been one of those, you were expecting something and you got something else, those happy accidents, because I love it. If you are a die cutter, one of the old hacks or the old magic tricks that we like to do as die cutters is taking a piece of cardstock, folding it in half, placing it inside a die, but place the fold inside the cut edge. You may have seen this. I mean, the idea has been around forever, because you can create table tents. You can do all sorts of things with the idea. So I believe that Stacy took that idea and said, oh, I'm going to make little foldable cards like this out of the die. But here's what was discovered. And Stacy, really, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, she said they're a happy accident. Okay, because really, like, it was unbelievable. So taking that idea of a folded piece of paper, placing it inside the Switchlit, because remember, the Switchlit, although it has a die in it, it's technically not a thin die, right? It's a die as part of an embossing folder. So pressure and everything obviously is different. So when you put the fold in and cut it, it embossed both things, but it only cut the top layer. So this is a piece of paper, and I believe she's going to share a tutorial on this as well, so I can really learn the true details. But take a look at these adorable cards where the top part is the Switchlit, said, yeah, the die cut.
Yes, folded, then put in, but it doesn't cut through the one layer.
Yep, so I can't wait to see the tutorial, because that's awesome, because then essentially this background layer could be anything, right? It could be a square where this is just a flap. It could be something where you kind of tuck something in, like maybe you're gonna do it as a place setting and you have like their name written, but this is longer. And I mean, the base, the cool thing about this idea is the base could be whatever size you want it to be, as long as the top part is going to fit into the fold of the folder, but the length, it could be whatever. And the idea, same idea as those little cards on the tag, but look at the detail, because you're getting that embossed on the base card, as well as the embossed cutout detail on the top, right? So you have that, that's going to give you the cut. And it was really interesting that, see how it left like a little impression of the die, right? You can see that pinked edge, but it did not cut through it. And really all the little stitching around there, I love all this little fragmented stitching. I need to learn how to do that, because that's more my speed, where it's like stitched, ripped out, cut off. Like, that's a whole new vibe. Cool. But so brilliant, right? So many super clever ideas for just, taking these elements and using it, yeah, from everything from cards to favors to whatever. Just very cool for a Switchlit. That's it. Yes, I know. Yeah, I agree. It's like, you kind of hear about that Switchlit, or you see it. And that's the other thing about seeing stuff online, is that you see the shape and you're like, meh, maybe it's not your thing. And that is why I can't say it enough. A shout out to the makers, because really we all put in so much effort to really show you the potential of a die and a shape. And it couldn't be done really without their amazing, amazing talent and skill. So next we're going to talk about the Impresslit butterfly. And there's a lot of makes for the butterfly, so that tells me that it's a definite fave. And this card is done by Pete. I love the simplicity of that white glittered butterfly. You can see that beautiful background cropped off. Very, very simple, but that's the nice thing about an Impresslit. That in itself is going to cut and emboss, and that is the focal point. But you're going to see throughout this, this display of makes that you can completely change the look and feel of this butterfly by what you do with it, what paper you do, what inked finish, anything that you want to create on it. So Sharon created this card, beautiful card with the blues and golds. It's layered on all these wonderful layers of blue and teal layers and then gold over the top. And I'm sure it's supposed to be, you know, fluffed up and pretty, but there's another one that I'm going to share that she did and was showing on social. But you can see that you have the ability to kind of separate these layers on a card once it's displayed. And I love seeing the metallic over that beautiful teal turquoise background. Quite stunning. But see just the detail and stuff. You don't have to do anything for that butterfly, but that's the nice thing about it. Keisha created this one. I love this. So this one is done, I believe this is vellum. Looks like vellum to me. It's a wonderful kind of a pearly look. It's absolutely beautiful. And I love seeing it over that inked background. Keisha, I love this. This is stacked up with that background. And I love seeing that border. So that's if you use the entire background, you're still going to get that nice edge. But this is stacked up, a couple layers on there. But look at that over the alcohol ink background. Just such a pretty card paired with the Ideology metallic stickers. I'm trying to get, there we go, that metallic in the font to show up and just that addition. It's so pretty, isn't it? Such a beautiful way to use the die. And you're going to see, I'm just going to kind of build that each time. It's just different. You're getting a whole different look and feel every time. So Rochelle created this card. Rochelle did a very shabby vintage. There you can see how beautiful that Impresslit is layered over that mini folder. Again, you guys, scale. It's all about scale of pattern, right? So seeing the detail, putting it over a detailed background makes everything seem, well, detailed, right? You put that over something bigger, it's just going to, I think, take away from the detail that we're trying to look for in there. And it's really, really impressive to see how things show up, right? So whether it's on vellum or cardstock, that's the beauty of an Impresslit. It's really going to show all the different detail, and you get to give it its own look and feel depending on the papers, inks, whatever that you use, right? Jen created this. I love this one. So here you can see those are those decorative trims again, just layered. I love that. I love the bright color over that very, very monochromatic background, that black and white neutral. I love seeing this in cardstock, and the splatter. That little splatter is everything to me because it's just taking that and you get that little bit of grunge over there that ties in with the grunge in the background, and then that pop of that bright distressed color layered on there. So you can see the use of those trims as a wonderful ruffle or border on a card. Very, very clever make, and then just using that as a focal point. Just beautiful. I just love reading all these makers, Keisha, Sharon, like everyone's just like showing each other the love. But that's the cool, because see, that's the other thing. The makers don't know what each other did either. They're seeing it for the first time when you guys are. That's what I love. So Zoe with a Y created this one. This tag, I love this. Again, a very cool distressed butterfly, inked. I love the grunge of it by that like dark outline in the back. I love also just kind of the finish that those inks give just on the raw paper. But take a look at the background of the tag. You guys notice anything on the background? Besides the beautiful color, besides a little bit of crackle that's showing up, look at these wonderful frames. Those are the stacked rectangles again. This time just cut into frames, and she glued all those frames on, and look at how it gave such a cool geometric balance to that butterfly. So utilizing those frame pieces, gluing and overlapping, and then doing your inking and collaging over it. That's what I was saying. You can think of a lot of die cuts often as texture or I don't know, kind of another dimension that you couldn't achieve with a stencil, right? Because a stencil would have all those little open pieces, and that's the beauty of also working dies and stencils, combining them both. I think it's great. All right. This next card, Juliana created this. Take a look at that wonderful metallic patinaed finish, right? I showed you eroded metallic, and then she did hers way better than mine, and I love it. I love seeing just that oxidized, patinaed copper metallic butterflies. So beautiful just to have them on a card. And again, when you're using this, you can glue everything flat, you can secure it, but you'll see in most of the makes, they kind of just left the wings free. So the recipient can get that and kind of give it a little dimension if they're going to display it, because I love how it casts a nice shadow. There's a stencil in the background, right? Great to use stencils with your dies, as I mentioned. And then of course, using your inks, paste, that's a little ideology label sticker. But how great just to see that design being used on a slimline card. So beautiful, so beautiful. Love that grunge. I do. I look at that and I'm like, oh my gosh, so good. Here's another grunge. Pete created this one. Same concept, but just used in a different way. Again, creating that beautiful oxidized patina look, layered that with one of those mini embossing folders, some stamped elements in the background. So that's the other thing when it comes to creating cards. You can put it on a background, a great opportunity to layer your ephemera or stamped images on that. But that's the whole thing. Sometimes when you buy an element that has detail, celebrate that, right? Sure, we can do a creative casserole and use every single thing in the chapter on a make. That's great. But you can also take an element and just celebrate that. There's no right or wrong when it comes to how you want to use a die cut or shape. It's completely up to you how that needs to be. So Debbie created this. Take a look at this. This is one of Sizzix shaker domes. You can see the size of that. So it's not as bubbly as a dimensional dome. It has a slightly less contour, but I love seeing those dried botanicals in there. Isn't that beautiful? I'm trying to get where the light doesn't glare too much. There you go. You have those little dried flowers in there, and take a look at the texture of that butterfly. Oh, so beautiful. And then it's paired, take a look at the background on that card, right? So you can see there's a lot of makers that really paired the butterfly with this background, which I think is great. Sharon did that. Keisha did that. I think it was really nice to see how those come together. They were not designed to go together, and that's the beauty. Each one was its own idea, but I love how cohesive they are together. And just seeing those little touches of metallic, you can see where the light hits it, and then ideology. A lot of makers this time, I have to say, really kind of coordinated a lot of different ideology elements into their makes with Sizzix. I see a lot of Stampers Anonymous, and of course we see Ranger in, well, everything, because, well, that is life, right? Distress is life. So just beautiful, beautiful to see. I'm going to set that so I don't get too much glare. There we go. Very, very pretty. Love it. All right. This next one, Zoe with a Y created this little canvas panel. I do love that. I love that little art panel. Just a stretch canvas going in with oxides and then using that on the butterfly. I mean, look at that. Rust patina. And then that little panel, again, you'll see that mini 3D in use and then paired with some ideology. But a very cool rustic vibe. And I love the colors. I love seeing, you know, I told you when we were going to look at all these butterflies, you're going to see so many different things with it. Ah, Zoe, that's so nice. Yeah, I think when it comes to a design or a detail, that each maker is really highlighting the elements that they see that they want to feature. And that's what I really love about seeing that. So that canvas, very cool. And the next one, you're going to see like Total Extreme, right? Jen Shirkus, Total Extreme, right? Card. I mean, you can see the similarities, but the vibrancy, the beauty, and just paired onto a raw vignette. Yeah, we've seen vignettes covered in paper and paint, and all of that is great, but also just using that wood finish, just that natural element as a backdrop to these beautiful, colorful butterflies and how they are used with the Impresslit and then paired with the ideology quote chips. But a great way that you can take whatever medium you like to work with and utilize that Impresslit to create something just quite stunning, vivid. I love the splash of color, right? Love the pop of color. We're gonna run out of room here. There's a few more butterflies. It's beautiful, Jen. I love it. I always love seeing the color. Now this next one, I'm gonna be honest. I saw this one and I'm like, what? And then I was like, I remember. So many of you have probably seen this on social media. Now this right now may not be recognizable in this aspect because it wasn't to me when I first checked it out. I'm like, okay, well, alrighty, I can totally, that looks great. Sharon created this one, and that's what shocked me because Sharon, as I said, is kind of the go-to color. But really what this make is, it's an entire series of beautiful rainbow cut butterflies. And you saw in the photos on her sneak peeks that these were all fanned out. So I'll be able to do this now. To when this make is open, you get to see that beautiful splash of color. How freaking cool is this, right? So these are all just solid color cardstocks cut, and then they're all layered, adhered in the center, but you put it on that background, and there's some color splattered in there. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see all these little colors that she used. See, now you notice the color because you see that cardstock. That's like a chameleon make, right? When you first see it, it's like, well, it's like I look at it and like, oh, it's black. But then as soon as you see those colors, then you notice all the other, it kind of reminds me of like honeycomb, right? You know, when you have those honeycomb things that you can just open. But now you start to notice all the detail, and there's that dye used in the background. Just, it's a beautiful way that you can incorporate color into that mixed media art, and then using a clip, again, an etc. tag as a foundation. But that's, yeah, that's a center. Beauty and simplicity, I'm telling you, very, very cool to see how that's done. And whether maybe you don't want to go the extreme of black cardstock, maybe you want to take this more with a white background. It would look really just as dramatic if you had a white background and a white butterfly, and then you went and did all of those colors. Or maybe you're into vintage and you want that to be craft. I just thought it was very brilliant to have just that one constant color and then just a splash of all the other vivid colors in there. Just, not a beautiful make? It's like, wow. Yeah, stunning, stunning, stunning. Then we have a couple more collage ones. Kath created this one. I love this etc. tag. So many makers use etc. tags this make. Again, there's no structure to them. They get to choose whatever foundation they want to create with. So it's cool to see so many vignettes and etceteras and panels. But if you take a look at this, again, look at the background first. So the background is broken up into almost a patchwork. That's using the rectangles. Then you're going to see all those frames. Now this one, this is what I was saying before about your frames don't have to be thin. They can be the wider frame as well. So by just kind of skipping a size before you nest it and cut it out, you're able to cut out wider frames that maybe add more of a dramatic or bold effect. And then she cut up some backdrops to put in there. And I love just those butterflies. And there you can see that Varsity in there, fly with brave wings she flies. Isn't that cool? Beautiful colors, beautiful texture. I love Kath's style. I love just yeah, just such a great way of just doing vintage collage in such a great way. And I love the elements of mummy cloth too. There's a little bit of that ideology mummy cloth we do every Halloween, but it's kind of like this gauzy stuff that is very easy to just kind of pull apart. Very cheesecloth looking stuff. It's cool. Isn't that beautiful? Great background. Great, great background paired with those Impresslit butterflies. It's beautiful. All right. So we've got this make from Emma, a beautiful collage. And there's so many layers to this that when I first set up, I'm like, oh, wow. And then I was just looking over here and I'm like, oh, I didn't even notice that switchlit in the back. See, I was so looking at kind of that beautiful wreath that was created, right? The funky wreath just layered and layered. And I thought, what a beautiful background for the butterfly. And again, there's layers on this one. So you can see that there's an ink layer and another layer. So you can bend these up and you can create that wonderful dimension. And I love seeing the color. Very cool to stack those. But I completely missed that switchlit in metallic. It's a great foundation, right? Because otherwise, you know, you're going to put that in the middle of a wreath. You don't have a foundation. It's like a chia pet. You're going to lose it. So I think that really sets off that beautiful look. Stunning. In the background, again, so much detail with that die cut that it didn't have to be a panel. Cutting it up and laying it down. But yeah, Emma has such a wonderful style of using that. I love the mica layer. So you can see the mica on there with the brads. I love seeing this metallic effect with the dies. Free to fly. That ideology label, the ideology measurement, that metal ruler. There's so much good stuff on this frame panel. It's just such a stunning work. And you can see also like the grunge where the body of the butterfly just looks a bit more rusty, right? So that's the other thing as a maker. You get to really add your own unique kind of spin or personality to every single one of the makes. All of these butterflies, same die, totally different look, right? Beautiful. All right, now there's some other makes. I have them off to the side because, well, they're bigger. So I kind of needed to save those to the end because they're going to take up space. They're going to take up setting space. So I'm going to bring those in just to show you, because the other thing to know about dies in general, dies, especially bigger shapes, they're always going to give you the opportunity, and maybe this isn't for every maker. Maybe you're just a card maker, and I don't say just a card maker. I meant maybe you just make cards, right? Because that's your thing. And maybe you just make scrapbooks. Maybe you don't want to go into mixed media, or maybe you want to dabble. But one of the things that I always find so inspiring from a Sizzix point of view is the ability to take dies and turn them into home decor, right? To me, that's something that, I mean, I just don't see that happening with stamps very often. Because stamps really, I mean, yeah, you can do little elements, right? You can make note cards, you can do, collage pieces, but a die allows you to create something big. So this is a beautiful wreath. I'm going to light it up. There you go. You can see the little tiny lights. Tiny lights are intertwined throughout, but you can't see them too much, but they are there. Debbie created this. Debbie Adams. This is just a metal ring, and take a look at that. Just look at all of these Impresslit butterflies she glued on to this wreath. And then she just took the Ideology tiny lights, just kind of loosely wrapped them. But here's what's interesting. Some of the butterflies are full on metallic, and then in true detail style, some of them are like dipped on the bottom and then foiled, right? So it's just a little metallic there. Some are cut and layered. So that's the Impresslit, and then the outside trimmed off and then layered on top. There's just so many different ways that these are done. They're sculpted, and then they're just stacked. And you can see there's just matte gold cardstock, shiny gold, white, dip. It's just, that's like, wow, right? Taking an Impresslit and just doing that. Now, and the idea, I mean, this is very beautiful, metallic. I mean, to me, it has such a wonderful sophistication. This could be interpreted in many ways, right? You can create a whole rainbow wreath, right? You can do like what Jen did with all the different colors, or Sharon did of the different colors of butterflies, and create a whole rainbow wreath of butterflies. But I love how they're just like, they're fluttering off everywhere, right? They're just layered and going all over, and just from that die. Like, seriously humbled by what makers do. That's why I said, whenever they take it to a whole different like home decor level, I'm like, whoa, okay, wow. So Jan created this pillow. You can see that's why I couldn't incorporate it with potted, but this uses potted too. But she did this on a pillow, right? So she created this wonderful pillow, stitched all of these flowers, because remember, the benefit of a steerable die is you can cut thicker things, different fabrics. This is felt. You can still cut felt from a thinlit. So I love seeing all these felted flowers stitched on. I mean, look at all the detail, right? There is that stretch alphanumeric alphabet. That's a Sizzix die. And then stitch. How do you stay in the lane on that? No way. Look at that. I can stay in the lane. I probably couldn't even draw those lines, let alone sew them. Unbelievable, Jan. I love all the colors. I love how she has the colors of the felt that just kind of pull out the colors. This is my fabric with Free Spirit. That's memorandum. So I love how she just kind of pulled those colors in and incorporated the Sizzix die. So you could see all the different prints like stamped on there. That's the Stampers Anonymous crackle stamp, right? That's the wood grain fabric that we did. I love just seeing all the stitching, the little Ideology transparent wings. Isn't that just brilliant? I mean, come on. So much work. That's what I'm saying. Like, when we were assigning these, we didn't say, oh, hey, you need to make a pillow, Jan. It's just like you make like whatever. But this is what inspired Jan to create, was to create a pillow, or Debbie creating a wreath. That to me is absolutely amazing. Beautiful, isn't it? So cool. All right. So this next one, I need to do some setup.
You have a little bit
I do.
of setup here.
And I really hope that I do this justice. So this is from Tammy B. Now Tammy, she has a wonderful Disney-esque imagination. So she created her makes around this theme. I showed you that little card, but that card, of course, was personal to me. These were her makes. And so her makes, and I think she's going to do a whole series on it. And so he's like, it will be Tammy B. She's going to do, I'm sure she'll share an entire series either on her blog or Instagram, but the whole entire theme of her makes are around a tea party in the garden. Now I definitely had to be schooled on the tea party. So she did send me several videos on here's how I need to set it up and here's this, and because I want to do it right? But it's going to be limited because this is designed as a tablescape, but you can't see visually the tablescape. So I'm going to have to do my best to present it this way. All right. So this is her first make, and it set her a tag where you can see she used potted to and potted. And then she also used, I love this, that's that Colorize Cafe where she used the teacup. That's the bold text. You can see the stems. And this is all about tea in the garden. So she said this could be like an entry sign or for a guest book, or this could be something that just sets the tone for your tea party, right? So this would be the sign for that. But then she also created so many different elements. So these next three are where she took potted and she made these great little table tents, right? So she took the die, created all the cool effect. Like, look at that grit paste where it looks like moss. I mean, come on, you guys. That's a little grit paste. And then just did that little fold, glued them on the top. So now these become, you know, like a table tent. I'm sure they can stand up if I do it right. There you go. So that would, of course, involve balancing your flowers and all of those things that the detail that she would put into it. But each of these, so this would be like a place card setting where you would set this in front of your guests there, and you could maybe have their names or whatever. And I love seeing just the finish also, that wonderful metallic. And so these would all stand up. So I'll lay them there so you get the idea that, you know, this would be in front of the place setting. So far, so good. Then she sent me, well, the place setting. I mean, come on, she sent me this. Like, so this is a place setting that she did, and there is our perspective moth layered over that switchlit, just that wonderful stem, and just use this with some tulle just to kind of wrap that table setting. I mean, how charming is that, right? So you've got just this with maybe the guest name or a card, and you just have that beautiful setting. So beautiful. Oh, I just saw Erin said she's getting married, obsessed with this. So there you go. Like, for a wedding, this would be ideal. It's so beautiful. And if you look at the background, like that little translucency, I don't know if she layered this on vellum, but it's kind of splattered, but it really does have a very beautiful garden. Again, I'm so surprised how many makers used perspective moth with that switchlit. I just think, like, totally changed everything to me. But then, of course, she steps it up. So that would be the normal place setting. And I told you I have to kind of, I'm limited to space here. So that would be kind of, I'll call that phase one. How about that? Phase one? Is that fair, Mario? I think. A few phases coming. Yeah. And this next one, though, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So I'm trying to do it justice by serving it on an antique silver platter. This is from my collection. But I really wanted to do this presentation justice because when I saw it, I was just like, you know, I mean, I'm a grungy guy, but I can totally appreciate the pretty. And that's what this is. This is the pretty, okay? So let's just talk about this first. So this whole teacup, I'm going to disassemble to assemble because she gave me instructions on assembly as well. So she glued this for me because she probably knew I couldn't get the teacup on. And I'm just telling you, like, she totally, like, she wrote it out for me. All right. So seeing this teacup, I love just the accent of like the little spoon, little metallic spoon. But all of these little favors are created. That's the thing that I really want to point out. So here you have the tea bag, and it's wrapped in tulle. There is the little switchlit, and there is that teacup from Colorize. Now, Colorize, of course, normally you build in color, but that base is still a wonderful shape of a teacup, right? So she just utilized that where she created that little favor, wrapped it, and that is what goes into the cup, right? So your guest has their tea and has that wonderful little thing. Then we have this. So we have this wonderful Impresslit butterfly that she is layered and she is glazed, and she cut out this section in the middle, right? Now, the cutout is so it can go onto the edge or the side of the teacup. And again, I believe Tammy's probably going to do a tutorial to talk about, you know, what she put on the paper to make it do all that. But this way, it just sits on the edge of that teacup. I mean, do you see what I mean? Like, come on. And
Tammy says she loved your tray.
oh, thank you. I'm trying. I'm trying to do it justice. But what a beautiful setting for just the, see, I knocked it off again. I have to watch my pork chop fingers. Oh man, see Tammy, you got me all nervous now. All right, okay. So next we're gonna go into the other favors, and Tammy's here, so you can totally ask her more details because I'm not your tea party host. But I love the idea of creating these little pouches that could be for little sweets like chocolates or any other thing that you want to put in, but you'll notice that these are done with the mini 3D folder, right? And that's where you can just emboss the panel, do your coloring. You can have a plain panel on the back, stitch it together. This is a little Ideology velvet, and then they have a little treat. This could be chocolates or whatever sweets that you want to use, or maybe you can put other tea in there, whatever it is you want to incorporate. I think these are beautiful elements, and both of these, of course, are the two new mini 3Ds. So whether you wanted to do the mini rose or the mini botanical, they both go on there. I know the stitching, I mean, seriously, come on, all right? Then we have these, right? You guys have seen the matchboxes, but now these are little favor matchboxes done completely different. So here is the matchbox, but instead of cutting the hole out of it to do the dimensional dome, she used all the circles and all the little detail that come with the new Matchbox die, and then used the tiny tattered floral die. Tiny tattered floral is the tattered floral that comes with the quilling tool. So you roll up these dimensional flowers, the little rose. I don't know if you can see it from getting a little glare on the ring light, but there you go. You can see that all these flowers, they're all dimensional inside that dome. And all of these are cut from Ideology worn wallpaper. Some of them are Ideology backdrops. I love the different touches of metallic, but there again, when you open this up, these have little sweets inside. Now, I'm not familiar with these sweets. Tammy sent me the bag of them. I've never even heard of them before. There's some, I don't know, they're like minty bug looking things. I don't know, but they're neat. They're cool looking. And they fit in there. She initially sent me chocolate, but you can't send chocolate to Arizona in July. It didn't make it even in the bag, but she sent these as backup. But very cool just to take little candies. It could be any little favors for your guests. It could be open. It could, I mean, there's so many different details to creating the party. And that is what I really loved about seeing all of these elements. I know, listen, this group's all about the snacks, right? Yes, they are mint. But it was very cute to see how Tammy took this release. Because again, this isn't something that it's like, oh, let's have a meeting and let's talk about what you're going to do. No, this is what she made, and this is what she sent, and you get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. That's the thing about the makers. They get to do what they want to do. That's the beauty of it. And for her to kind of have that vision of taking an entire chapter that really you've seen from all the makes is not very cohesive, but applying that into a theme was just very cool to see how that comes together. And that is why I love to celebrate the makers. I love that they get to do what they want to do and how they see those dies being used, because that's everything.